Hey everybody, it is Swankivy with another video in my ACE interviews series. So we've got a few of these under our belt so far. If you are just catching up with us now, this is me trying to get volunteers from around the world in the ACE community, diverse representations of different orientations, different experiences, so we can get some different voices onto my channel for once, so you don't have to just listen to me talk all the time. So today, my guest is Kat, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Kat?
Hello. What is there to say about me? I am an Australian, obviously. I'm fairly new to the whole activism thing, but not to the whole ACE thing. I've been ACE for about 10 years, or I've identified as ACE for about 10 years. And yeah, I heard from a friend about Swankivy's interviews that they were doing and was a huge fan of the idea. So I feel like we always need more diverse voices in the queer community. So yeah.
So like a little bit deeper, like what are you doing with your life? Are you passionate about? Anything you want to share about your orientation? Tell us all.
I'm bad at interviews to start with. I'm non-binary as well. We were going to talk about intersectionality in a little bit and how that relates. What else? I guess what I'm doing for a job. I'm currently a communications assistant in a nonprofit.
Nice.
I'm a huge fan of using communications and communication skills to problem solve, because I feel like a lot of problems, like in socially and in terms of just infrastructure, do come down to gaps in communication and gaps in knowledge and people not knowing where to get information or where to get help. So yeah, I'd like to expand hopefully on that in the future.
Fantastic. Oh, that's great. Thanks for coming on the show. This is going to be awesome. If you don't mind, when I dive in here with the questions, I want to kind of rewind all the way to the beginning of, can you tell us a little bit about kind of your ACE discovery? Like, how did you decide that asexual was the term you wanted to use, and how did that all go for you?
Sure. My kind of self-discovery story is the same as a lot of other people's, in that I stumbled across Avon one day and then I was like, oh shit, this is a thing. This is like a normal thing that people can be. And it was kind of, I don't want to say that it was traumatic, but there was this moment of, like, for ACE people who are not sex repulsed necessarily, but have put themselves in situations which they found traumatic, in an effort to fix themselves or to find this version of themselves that didn't exist. It can involve a lot of processing to come to terms with, what that truth means, that you can just be in a relationship and not owe someone this part of yourself that you don't want to give. So yeah, and discovering that as well when I was like 17, 18, was old enough to understand the implications in a relationship of, like, have I been abused? Is this what abuse is? And young enough for that to be a really big thing to process. But yeah, it got real heavy real quick.
Yeah. Well, sadly, I think a lot of us do have, not always necessarily, like you said, trauma, but kind of when you figure out that you're different in a way that you never really were raised to accept or understand as even part of the world. It's like this whole outsider experience, like, what is my life even now? How am I supposed to fit in to typical or atypical relationships or whatever? Like, everything is different now that I know this, or that I might be this.
Yeah, and I think that's a big key part of it, is just the normalizing of asexuality as a thing that a person can be. So, which I think is where a lot of people's understanding falls short, is because they think of it as an action, as a form of celibacy, and not as an orientation, or as a way of being that is totally healthy and totally normal, and, you know, is only really problematized when someone feels entitled to someone else's body.
Yeah, absolutely. When you came across Avon kind of first and early. Did you feel like you fit into the definition that they described, or did you feel like you kind of had to look for more specific terminology, or like how did that work?
Well, I'm not a really specific person. I think I'm more found a description of sexuality that fit me so much more closely than anything else had. Up until that point, I'd identified as bi, because you know, on an emotional level, I'm attracted to different people in the same way. Gender is kind of a non-issue for me, just across the board. And, you know, non-binary identity kind of comes into that as well. Um, yeah, in terms of did I fit Avon's definition, I don't know if I fit it as literally as I read it,
Right.
but I fit the definition of asexuality as I don't experience sexual attraction at all. And that was the thing that I zeroed in on, that I was like, this is, because up until that point, you know, I knew that I did not feel sexual attraction in the way that I'd had it described to me, but I was like, well, I'm the only one I know. So if I'm the only one, then I'm not one, you know. But suddenly I wasn't the only one anymore. So like, since then I've come to encounter other people who identify as ace, who experience it in a way that is differently to how I experience it. And that it's still a very legitimate experience of being not heterosexual, or of being not, you know, a sexual person. And I think that's, you know, if people can accept that bisexual people and that pansexual people, and that even straight and gay people experience attraction to other genders in a variety of ways, then the same thing should logically extend to asexuality, that you can have a spectrum of attraction that ranges from experiences no sexual attraction to experiences a bit under certain circumstances, and for that still to be legitimate.
Oh yeah, well said.
Thanks.
That's great. It's interesting that you said you're not a very specific person, because a lot of times you encounter in the ace community people who are almost the opposite. They're like, I am a non-binary pan-hetero demisexual bi romantic, you know, something like that, and we get teased for that. But you know, sometimes people really want to give names to all the different kinds of attractions that they are feeling, and you know, then you might get someone like you who's like, you know what, I fit in this, that's all I really need.
I opted out of the system.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, you don't necessarily have to have a super specific term for it either. Like, you can just say, I'm attracted to what I'm attracted to, and it doesn't necessarily have to have a name to be what it is. So
yeah, I think we're kind of all caught between this weird dichotomy of needing to explain ourselves and needing to justify ourselves at all times. So some people kind of preemptively try to over categorize themselves almost, or, you know, in a way that they might not otherwise feel the need to. And for some people, instead, they're like, oh, I don't do labels, because labels just haven't worked out for them. And it's like, where's the comfortable in between, you know? And maybe for everyone it's different. Maybe some people have a stronger need for labels than others.
I think so. And I think it's really important that we kind of respect each other's level of need for those things, because you do see a lot of people who say, oh, well, why call yourself anything? You're a person, just be a human, you know? And I'm like, you know, most things
like, I am.
You know, but I mean, I am that too, but yeah, totally. So piggybacking off of the question that I asked you about your discovery story, like, who do you disclose your status to? Are you as they say, out, and do you talk about it pretty openly, or do you feel like you can't share that part of yourself with certain people?
I am out. It's not something that I hide. I don't go out of my way to not talk to people about it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I'm kind of shielded in a way by, first of all, by my non-binary identity being a bit more known, and also a bit more obvious. Like normally my hair's really quite long. It's normally a lot shorter than this. So I'm typically a bit more gender ambiguous.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that there's like a lot of people in the ACE community. If you look at surveys, the pattern generally goes much larger proportion of women and non-binary and genderqueer and gender fluid people, and a much smaller proportion of men.
That's right.
So that tends to be, gender is the much more public facing identity, I guess.
Mm-hmm. That is really
when it comes to ACE identity, I think when people are confused by it, they're more likely to just not ask about it. Like, I'm pretty sure my mum knows, but I don't think that she knows what it means. So she's just like, that's Kat's thing.
Mm-hmm.
She's still getting used to the pronouns. So it's like, I don't want to put too much on her at once. But yeah, most of my friends, I'm really fortunate in that I live in a really lefty city. Canberra is there's a solid community here of queer people and of activists and of people who are very, very pro being yourself. So I'm kind of have been spared a lot of pressure to stay in the proverbial cake closet. But yeah, I think the majority of pressure that I've felt in regards to being ace has come from online, which I think, what I hear is that that's the more common source of exclusionism.
Yeah.
To put a name to it.
No, I think you might be right, because I definitely have not encountered anywhere near as much like harassment or exclusion in person, in broader queer activism as I have online, like just maybe twice in person. And then like, if you want to go online, I'm talking about hundreds of times. So yeah.
Sorry, you froze a bit, so I missed the last half of that sentence.
I was just saying the experience that I have had is very similar to what you said. Is online hundreds of times I've probably heard nasty commentary excluding aces from mainstream queer activism, whereas in person maybe twice.
Yeah, which is how you'd prefer to have it, honestly, if it had to happen.
Right.
But it's still a huge bummer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you typically don't feel like, oh, I have to tell people immediately about my orientation, just maybe more if it just happens to come out. Did it freeze?
Sorry, you frozen. I missed the second half of the question. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry about that.
So the part of the question that I got was basically, no, you go again.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, sorry about the freezing, whatever's causing it, I don't know. So you don't feel like you have to disclose your orientation to people when you meet them or anything. It's just something that you'll discuss if it comes up?
Yeah, basically. I think because that part of it is just I'm a non-confrontational person generally, and I don't want to have difficult conversations that aren't necessary. Also because I don't feel like it's something that I really owe to anyone. Like that was a very hard one. Attitude to have, is the feeling of like I don't owe it to anyone for them to know things about me that will not affect them, and my asexuality doesn't really affect anyone except for me and the person that I might be in a relationship with. And like I've been single for the past like 3 years, so it hasn't been relevant. And up to the point that it becomes relevant, I'm like, I don't need to talk about this. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, that is kind of has come more into question with activism, because in order to be an activist, you have to be very upfront and forthcoming about where you stand in a situation, and what right have I to speak on behalf of this demographic? Well, because I share experiences that take place in this demographic. So yeah,
Okay.
I with at some point is how much of myself do I want to share in order to be an effective activist and get my point across. It's more of a question now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I'd love to talk a little more about what you touched on with romantic relationships and disclosure. Like you said, you've been single for 3 years or whatever, but how do you identify romantically, and what's your experience been dating as a romantic ace?
Well, I'm just with labels again. I still identify as bi insofar as I'm attracted to people regardless of gender presentation. And I know that there's a bit of a conversation happening between what counts as bi versus what counts as pan, and like what are the qualifiers for each category. I'm just like, either both. I don't know, people are cool. I like the tall ones because they can reach the high shelves. Like I'm attracted to tall people, I guess.
I'm so short myself, so I get that.
There you go. You know the feeling. You've got the vibe.
Yeah. Y'all measure in centimeters over there?
Yeah. So what am I? I'm 150, I think. Quite
Yeah,
short.
I'm below that. I'm like 148. So we're about the same size. That's funny. Yeah, it's good to have somebody who's much taller. But like,
yeah, I just want someone who can like pick me up and carry me over a puddle. But yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate in my last relationship that the person that I was with wasn't a pressuring person. They were someone who was very understanding and who didn't see their desires as a right to put me in situations where I was uncomfortable. And I feel like that's really important in relationships. Just first of all, being able to communicate where your boundaries are and being able to revisit them if they move, and being willing to respect each other's boundaries. Like, that's such an essential relationship skill. And once you've got it, like, you can apply it to any kind of orientation, any situation that you're in. But yeah, my earlier relationships when I was younger, when I was a teenager, were not quite like that. And that's another common thread that I find when I talk to other asexual people, is the journey of discovering yourself as an asexual person often comes right at the end of a long chain of trial and error. And, experiences that lead to a feeling of brokenness, or a feeling of, being pathologized or having your identity medicalized, So in a way, I'm also lucky that I've found the language to defend my lack of interest, before now, because now I'm 29, and like when you're 29, like the impression I get is that I'm supposed to know who I am by now.
Good luck.
But yeah, I can't imagine how confused and how aggravated I'd be if I only heard the word asexual applied to human beings at this point. But a lot of people do, because it didn't really emerge into, like, asexuality as an identity didn't really emerge into the public consciousness until so recently.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely was my experience, because nobody was talking about that in the 1990s when I was a teenager. So luckily for me, I didn't have like a really long string of bad dating experiences. And kind of similarly to you, I felt like I had some kind of core of understanding already, even if I didn't have language. that I didn't kind of fall for the scam that you owe me this, or you must be selfish if you will not compromise on this. But that unfortunately does get so many ace people who are unwilling for whatever reason, if they're repulsed, if they're unwilling, if they're wondering why they don't feel the way the other person feels toward them. But it's so important that people understand that in a two-person partnership, they are half the relationship and they are just as entitled to have their needs met, you know? It's so awful that that works on us, that works on so many of us, to be told that we owe at least to try to other people on their terms, and it doesn't matter how uncomfortable we are with it because we owe it to them. We're just supposed to do it.
Yeah, and it's very insidious because it's a culture-wide idea that that sexuality is a universal human trait. That it is unfortunately really easy to convince, especially young people, especially people who are in hypersexualized situations, or people like this is actually something that came up as earlier in my activist experience. A friend of mine was running a survey that I ended up editing a report for, and it ended up being a worldwide survey. It was initially just going to be Australian ACEs, and it turned into an international survey. And we had people responding, identifying as ACE, a huge chunk of them from Latin America. And we have a much smaller population of Hispanic and Latinx people in Australia, but I encountered on the internet this idea that BIPOC and Latinx people in particular are really hypersexualized, and that's a problem that they face. And, being a young person of color and being hypersexualized and being told, this is the way you are, this is the way you must live your life. It's like, are you allowed to be asexual? Are you allowed to identify like that? It's not something that occurs in a vacuum. It's it's a part of gender identity for some people. Young men feeling like they're in this really policed environment of hypermasculinity and hypersexuality, where saying no and being frigid is like, it's a weird behavior, and it can cost you friendships, and it can cost you social interactions, and it can cost you like avenues into like safer social situations. It's really, I think people don't realize how dangerous and how isolating it can be just to not have sexual attraction, because on the one hand, it is something that only affects yourself, but sexuality is a very socially involved aspect of people's lives. So it's kind of this weird balancing act that like every ace person I've ever spoken to has at some point faked being attracted to someone.
Yes.
Because it would have felt weirder in the moment not to.
Right. And it's almost...
And it's such an odd thing to explain to people.
Yeah. Like, people just talk to you and assume that whatever they think you are, you're obviously heterosexual and you're attracted to this gender, and ooh, look at him. Ladies, am I right? And I'm like, I guess. I'm a lady.
Like, you repeat things that you hear on TV, like, oh, he's got nice arms. his arms are as thick as his neck. That's the kind of thing that ladies find attractive, right?
Am I faking it?
It's like, yeah, no, I don't know.
No, I know what you're talking about.
I got a lot of, there was actually one response to the survey that I found really revealing, kind of, because there was someone who identified as ace who was attracted to women, and someone asked her, why don't you just call yourself a lesbian? And it really brought to mind and made clear this realization that in the queer community in particular, like, ace people face a lot of pressure to legitimize our identities by almost replacing them with something else that is more queer or that is more understood.
Yep.
And that's a huge problem, because if you have to erase the asexuality in order to be an asexual person in a queer space, then you're asking, you know, basically being told, I don't want to understand you. I don't want to understand what your particular needs are. And, you know, that's it's a really insidious form of erasure that I feel like doesn't really get talked about very much.
I agree. I've definitely seen that too, where if you identify as something on the trans spectrum, or you identify as a same sex or different sex attraction, in conjunction with somebody who is perceived to be your same gender, it's like that will always be the primary one. They're like, you know, I'll always be, I'm a cisgender woman, and I'm asexual, and I'm aromantic, and I can't separate out how many of my experiences as an aro person are because I'm a woman. You know what I mean? Like, I'll always be all of those things. So if somebody is an ace lesbian, you know, she might say, I'm an ace lesbian, and they'll be like, okay, lesbian. And she'll be like, ace lesbian, because that part is as important. It is a different experience. That's a very good point.
Thank you.
It's interesting also what you said about the race, the hypersexualization, because I saw that too in some of my research. I can't speak to that as a white woman in the West, but it's you know, something that I did see Black and Latinx people talking about, particularly people who are women or perceived as women would say, you know, they're subjected to those comments, whereas men are expected to put them out there, like this is how they socialize, that if you don't do it, then you're not really a man.
There's a really interesting paper, and it's killing me because I can't remember what it was called, but it was basically about the policing of Black masculinity. And there was a paragraph in it. This is the reason that someone sent it to me, I think, was because there was a paragraph in it that was about asexuality, and it was just one paragraph, but it really emphasized for me that, you know, there are so many diverse experiences under the ace umbrella that are intersectional experiences, which, you know, if you sort of put yourself in someone else's shoes and just try and, I guess, understand, I don't know, I feel like I'm not phrasing this very well. You might have to cut this ramble down. If it's really important to read literature that's written by and about people whose experiences are not like your own. And it was really important for me to read this, because up until that point, I didn't really fully grasp the gravity of the severity of the consequences that hypersexualization can have on people who are not like me. Like, I was affected by hypersexualization, but in no sense the same way as the person who this paragraph was written about. And if I remember it, then I'll send it to you, because it was really good. But yeah, there needs to be more written about non-white, non-Western experiences of asexuality, because like those people are out there. Like, they responded to the survey that my friend sent out. We had a respondent from Saudi Arabia. We had responses from like all over Europe. There are responses from Africa. Like, asexuality is not a white thing, and to call it a white thing is to erase the experiences of all these people who are not white.
I've seen a few aces of color say that sometimes they don't want to reveal that they are whatever non-white identity they are, because they feel like it might cost them a sense of belonging in these communities. And a lot of primarily white spaces, or perceived to be white spaces, will be casually racist all the time, and that's a problem that we need to own and work on. But it shouldn't be allowed officially, at least. I mean, you'll always see that in online forums, but you know, it definitely should not be allowed to flourish as built into the management or whatever, which I've heard complaints about here and there. And one interesting thing I also saw about, I guess, primarily, I think it was Black women that said this, that one person talked to me about this, and it was later echoed by other people when I was doing research for my book, where they said that it made them doubt their ace identity. Like, I didn't like being hypersexualized, and so I went the entire opposite way, and now I don't even know if it's valid or if it's just an overreaction, like that it comes into doubt in a way that it doesn't for some of us who are white.
It's kind of, it's come up in the humanities like a couple of times. I did my honors in the humanities, and like this idea that queerness is a thing that you are or a thing that you do is still very much like actively in debate. There is the queering of a thing, like it is a verb, it is a noun, and asexuality as well. Like, to what extent, how do people make sense of asexuality when they aren't asexual? Like, do you build it up in your mind as this response to a cultural phenomenon, or do you build it up as like an organic thing that a person can be born into the world and be asexual before they understand what sexuality is? And I think for a lot of us, before we have the opportunity to view ourselves as being naturally asexual, we have to make sense of not being sexually attracted as, oh, this is just how I'm responding to an external force. And, how that relates to culture in particular, like the less we know about how different cultures sexualize the people within them, or like the less we know about the effect that sexualization in different cultures has on asexual people, like we're not going to be able to truly represent or provide support for everyone in the community. So
that's right.
Yeah, I definitely, for anyone who watches this interview, read own voices, read diversely.
Yes. And we'll acknowledge, yes,
It's important. We
we're
need to support
people,
each other.
so it's like, if anybody who is an asexual person of color feels like they would like to have a discussion about this, I would love to see you here. But these are important conversations to have.
Absolutely. And I feel like I've banged on about it a bit, but at the same time, I'm like, part of owning and part of unlearning racism in the West as a white person does involve white people having these conversations among ourselves.
I agree.
Because, the more we educate ourselves and the more we seek out this information ourselves, the less pressure that puts on people of color to educate us, because that's like the way that I kind of clocked on, like, oh shit, I'm being a bit racist in a situation was like, if I were a queer person, which I am, having a conversation about this thing that is really integrally important to me and relevant to me with a straight person, how would that interaction look? Like, how would I feel about that? Oh, I'd feel kind of shitty. Oh, I'm being kind of shitty. So like, it is useful to take your own experiences of marginalization and use them as a stepping stone to understanding. And obviously being a white queer person is not the same as being a straight or queer person of color. But, like, we all have to reach that point of understanding at some point. And for me, that was realizing that, it's not all about me, but my experience of this shitty thing can help me kind of find a window into someone else's experience.
I love that you said that, because I agree that marginalized people are usually more able to see other marginalized people's issues. And that's part of the reason that us as queer people can understand, I think, better, and that they could understand us better than straight people do. I mean, they can be allies, but somebody who's a lesbian can understand my experience as an ace woman, because we're both in this heteronormativity nightmare, and it affects both of us very similarly. But we're still not having the same experience in the world. So
yeah, I
I think
mean,
we're
there are some, sorry.
We're just, we're
I think I might have
uniquely poised to understand each other. So.
Yeah. It kind of brings to mind, there's a lot of things that ace people hear, that we're making it up, that we're doing it for attention, that we're being special snowflakes, that we just want to be special, that there's something wrong with us, that we need to be fixed, that it's probably mental illness or it's probably a response to trauma. And these are all things that other queer people hear.
Absolutely.
Like, they are universal queer experiences. And so it's almost funny to me when, on the internet, I'll get an anon comment from someone saying, like, I don't know, some dumb shit, but like you'll read commentary speaking out against the inclusion of ace people in the queer community from people within the queer community, justifying the exclusion by saying that, like, that ace people are making it up. And I'm like, this person has been told this about themselves at some point in their lives. How are they not making the connection? Like, we're not doing this for fun.
Yeah, who would want this kind of attention?
Oh, right.
No, you're right. The one that I heard that I thought was the most absurd was someone saying, talk to me when you're disallowed from giving blood. And I'm like, but some people, like lesbians, are not disallowed from giving blood either. And they have a letter. So, right?
It's because it's not, it's a very emotionally motivated form of exclusion. And it is, I think, coming from a genuine place of pain. Absolutely. And a genuine place of feeling like your safe place is being invaded by someone who doesn't belong there. Yeah. But it also is coming from a place of not understanding that these spaces, like, ace people need queer spaces too. We need the support that the queer community can offer. And we deserve it because we have queer experiences. We are not heterosexual. Most of us don't identify as heterosexual. Most of us have experiences that prove that we need support and we need understanding. And the queer community is the best equipped to offer that understanding and that support. So,
yes,
let us in.
Well, they also, there are no individual people who are in charge of those gates. I think that for me, like, inclusion is the way of the future, that people will understand. They inherently understand, oh yes, you may not be exactly like me, but I'm not going to ask to see your punch card of how many times you've been punched coming out of a gay bar when you don't have an ace bar. So just, they don't do that to other gay people. They don't say, have you ever been gay bashed? Okay, now you can come in. It's not about that. Queerness is not defined by suffering. It can include it, but there isn't some automatic understanding of, okay, you've suffered this much, you can come in. Plus, we offer things as well. Like, many of us have very nuanced understandings of relationship negotiations that are kind of by necessity on a level that a lot of people don't interrogate. So we'll say maybe your sexual orientation is different from your romantic orientation, and that's helped a bunch of people. So I mean, it's not like we're just there to take resources. We give as well. We're all there for similar reasons.
I think that broadly as well, what asexual people and the asexual community have to offer the queer community is just the decentralizing of sex from queer identity, because for so many queer people, their problems begin when people start to define them through their relationship or their perceived relationship with sex.
Yeah.
And with ace people, our relationship with sex is that most of us don't have one. And those of us that do have a way of interacting with sex and sexuality and eroticism that is, quite creative and unique and does not look typical.
Yeah.
I mean, asexual people abstaining from sex is an expression of sexual agency, and it is a choice. And the power that sex has as like a disruptive force is rooted in the ability to give consent and the desire to express yourself in a way that comes naturally, whether that is to be attracted to someone who is the same shape as you or has the same gender presentation as you, or to not interact with it at all. So I think that that's the thing, is that the more understanding there is of the disruptive power of asexual identity, you know, maybe the more welcome we will be, because we need to be able to articulate that.
Yeah.
I've clearly spent a lot of time thinking about this.
These are wonderful points. I love
you.
having these discussions on my channel, and I'm hoping that some other people will be able to engage with them and say, like, me too, and I've had this experience. This is great.
Rad.
Kind of talking a little bit about the own voices thing. Like, I have you know, this series of questions here that we've talked about wanting to discuss, and if we can kind of move forward into the next one, it fits very nicely because you identify as non-binary, and that is a queer identity without any kind, like, well, I guess sometimes it gets the side eye from people who say, like, it's not real. So kind of similar situation sometimes, but you know, can you discuss like your NB gender identity and like how that intersects maybe with ACE experience and queerness broadly?
Sure. So I can't pinpoint when I started identifying as non-binary specifically. I think because as an umbrella term, it's very broad in my mind. I kind of define myself by how I don't define myself. So I've never really identified as a girl or as a woman. And a lot of the time, most of the time, like the vast majority of the time, I get read that way. And my experience with gender dysphoria is quite dysphoria. Oh my God, pronounce words correctly. My experience with gender dysphoria is it's sporadic and it doesn't resemble the sort of the mainstream understood narrative of transness. So while some days I'll feel hella masc and I'll feel like a guy, and like my nephew, when he was really, really young, he called me Uncle Cat for a while because he was introduced to my brother first and was just like, all of my mother's siblings are uncle. Yes. And I was thrilled to be Uncle Cat.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel like it was easier to come out as non-binary after I came out as ace. Because just back to the whole relationship with sex thing, I think a lot of people relate their gender in some way to this perceived dichotomy of male and female. So and I'd already kind of kicked off of that point from, well, everyone is sort of just people to me. I'm not attracted to any of them in particular, but I didn't have to think of myself as like one half of a whole, I suppose, or one half of a complete pair. It was easier to go like, hang on, these pairs don't actually exist. Like,
Wow.
this is, you know, when I was more used to thinking of gender and relationships as something that is acted out using tools that we are culturally given and told these are the tools that are available to you. And when you start to think outside of that box and be like, actually, I can just do whatever I want, and I can like give a voice to what my experience is, even if it doesn't fit in this narrative. Yeah, I wonder if it might have taken me a little bit longer to come out as non-binary if I hadn't come out as ace first, really. So yeah. So I don't advertise it a whole deal because I feel like the pronoun conversation is a difficult one to have, especially if you're the first person telling someone about it, because they'll be like, hang on, but grammar. And it's like, singular they is older than singular you. So
that is true.
Yeah.
I had a hard time with some of this when I was first trying to understand kind of what my position on all of this was. And part of the reason that I said, oh, if it was up to me, I would default to like the newer invented pronouns because they behave grammatically like singular does. But it was in no way an argument against singular they. I was like, if that's what your pronoun is, that's what I will call you. But
Yeah.
in meeting more and more people over the years, it just seems to be the most common non-binary pronoun, and it also seems the most natural in conversation because we already know how to use it. Just we've been doing it for a long time. You just said like you just used a singular they for a hypothetical person while you were talking about it, and people will say, I'm not going to call them by these crazy pronoun names, and I'm like,
you just did.
Yeah. So like I can see the I guess the temptation to say I want singular pronouns to behave like other singular pronouns, but we don't hold language to those standards in many other ways. And there are so many people who suddenly become grammar sticklers who they're not following other equally important grammar rules when they talk or write or anything. So I don't believe them.
It is, I think it does come often from a place of political identity, or, you know, I knew someone, I used to work with someone who called themselves a centrist, politically a centrist. And in actuality, like the views that they showed to me read very much as like casual conservative.
Yeah.
Like they're a young liberal, and the Liberal Party over here in Australia is basically the Republicans in America. The Labor Party is our Liberal Party, and they're more sort of centre aligned than they are left. So this person, they said that's how it be sometimes, and I was like, cool, that's a thing that we use in language, that's totally normal. I'm going to respond to that as if it's a normal sentence. And then like 2 sentences later, the they them thing came up, and they were like, that's not grammatically correct. And I'm like, buddy, you can't pick and choose. I think that people treat gender identity as something that's very politicized, but in treating it as if something that's political, they politicize it. Instead of just treating it as this is a thing that this person says is important to them. You know, it's not political to respect another person's identity and to acknowledge that, hey, I don't know this person as well as they know themselves. So if this confuses me, so do goldfish, you know. How are their eyes that big?
That's great.
It's like, I don't need to understand goldfish in order to know that goldfish exist.
That's true. I think for me, what you said is one of the major reasons that even if I personally think like maybe someone is using a set of very unusual pronouns, and you know, there might be like an old lady voice at the back of my head because of how I was raised, saying like, I feel weird using like they, their pronouns for somebody because it sounds weird to me or something. But like, you know, I would want to put that I would want to put that person's comfort, like you said, at the forefront of my interaction with them. But I feel like if you stop there and you say whatever they want, even if it's silly, then you'll never like internalize it's not silly, it's who they are, it's who the person is. And they can tell when you don't respect them, when you're humoring them, they can tell. So I think you have to dig deeper if your knee-jerk reaction is to say, I think your pronouns are ridiculous, but I'm going to humor you. The person will know that you don't really respect them. And that extends to asexuality as well, where they're just like, oh, it's their ace thing. It's that thing that they think they are. And I'm like, I can tell you don't believe me and you don't respect me. And you think one day I'm going to change what I call myself and admit that it was a phase all along.
Which is also harmful because a lot of people might identify as one thing for years and then change their minds. But like when you treat gender thing, and I'm saying this as a person who like, you know, has identified as ace for 10 years. If tomorrow I were to say, oh, actually, I'd like to experiment with my sexuality a bit more, that wouldn't negate the past 10 years and the reality that for the past 10 years, I have been dead set, 100% consistently confident that I never want to have sex ever under any circumstances. If that changes tomorrow, then that's tomorrow's problem, and I feel like it's really important to accept that people change over time, and that might include their gender identity, and that might include their sexuality, and that doesn't negate the need to show respect and understanding. And unfortunately, that's a thing that people still struggle with, even within the queer community. This is a thing that bisexual people face an awful lot, is being told, like, pick a side, like, they don't have to.
Yeah, and if they get married, like, people will perceive, okay, so actually all along, based on the gender of your partner, that's what you really were.
And it's like, no.
Nope, still bi.
Yeah.
No, you're right. And it's I guess more obvious in the queer community because we do use a lot of labels that maybe other people outside don't use. But I think in general, just everybody does change over their lives, even in very mundane ways. Like, I'm 42 years old, and I guess I'm not, I can't say, like, as a young woman, blah, blah, blah. I'm not, I'm young compared to my mother's generation, but I'm not young compared to college kids. Like, I could be their mother. So, I'm going to have to shift and change not only what I call myself, but my perception of who I am and what my relationship is with other people. And that's something that everyone who is fortunate enough to grow older will have to do as they grow older. And it doesn't mean they weren't ever really young, right?
Yeah.
Or that they weren't an authentic young person when they were young. So,
yeah.
I think it would be very disorienting for me at age 42 to suddenly feel sexual attraction for the first time. But if it happened, I would change what I called myself.
You'd be like, what is this?
Yeah. I think it is really important that we build flexibility and forgiveness and understanding into supporting other members of our communities, even if it turns out, okay, I realized I wasn't fully understanding myself, or, like, say, for instance, I've heard this a few times from trans people who, before they were transitioning physically, they said that they were asexual because, and I'm obviously not saying that there are no no ace trans people who were ace before and ace after, but I've heard this a few times, that people were identifying as ace, then they went through transition, and then they realized, oh, part of the reason that I absolutely could never see myself as having sex and having those relationships and feeling those attractions is that I would have to do it as the fake gender. And now that I'm feeling more comfortable in my body, I'm realizing that as my real gender and presenting that way and being seen that way, I do have this other aspect to me that I didn't even know was there until I affirmed this other part of myself. And, if you're identifying as ace, there's not a rule for, like, okay, if you're identifying as ace, you can't have any of these other complicating factors that make it weird. Like, it's what you're experiencing, not why. So,
yeah,
that's something that we really also need to work on, I think, in our communities, that we don't make people feel like a traitor if it turns out they're not really ace, or they're no longer calling themselves ace.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, it can be, sometimes, depending on the environment I'm in, I'm more or less willing to come out as ace or as non-binary, based on how I think either identity will be treated or will be received. And part of that is, I think I didn't come out as non-binary for a while because I was like, am I sitting on the fence? Am I a trans guy who's just afraid to come out? Am I faking it? And it's like, past cat to past cat, I'm like, you're not faking it. You're stressing out about it too much to be faking it. But yeah, it's like, how do you come out as something that is not really thoroughly embedded, culturally embedded. Like, how do you come out as something that you have to explain each time you come out?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the explaining part that is really intimidating.
Oh, yes. Really can be.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people who say that we're faking or that we're going through a phase or that we just want attention also underestimate how much thinking we do.
Yeah, like it really does consume a huge chunk of your time. And, you know, for trans people in particular, people who choose to socially or medically transition, who invest so much time and stress and money and risk often to have that identity invalidated, is really cruel and really betrays a misunderstanding of the sheer effort it takes to just be yourself in the world. And, you know, like, it's part of why mutual allyship is so important.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we really need to be there for each other, and we shouldn't even have to have too many prescriptive conversations about that, because it really should be natural to say, oh, you are my sibling in this fight and this journey. I see what you're going through, and I would rather uplift you than strike you down with judgment.
Yeah.
So
no, definitely.
Yeah, I guess it happens a lot, but it is unfortunate. So I thought of an anecdote and then I forgot it, so it's lost to the winds.
That's all good. You froze a bit, so I was like, is something happening? What am I missing? But all good.
Yeah. Well, oh well. Yeah, so yeah, I think with a lot of the attempts that we make to define ourselves, we also get a lot of the self-doubt comes from other people questioning whether we're authentic and putting these expectations on us to try things that we're not inclined to try. I actually had one guy just all self-important, you know, because he wanted to date me, and then he saw my profile and he's like, asexual, you can't say that. I'm like, why can't I say it? And he said, well, you haven't seen and been in the same room with and tried to have sex with every man on earth. Therefore, you don't know for sure that you are in fact asexual. And he's just like, I just owned you. And I'm like, why doesn't this apply to you? Why is it that you think that you know that you're straight? Because you certainly haven't applied. Why does that apply to me and not you? I mean, I know why, but
yeah, oh my goodness. It's like people see asexuality as a challenge to be overcome. It's like they see it as a dare, as, you know, and that's part of like the reluctance to come out for me, is I don't want to, like, because I did this once when I was younger. Someone was like chasing me and I said, like, I'm not the person that you're looking for the reason that I cannot give you specifically the thing that you're asking for. And they got really offended, and I was like, oh, is it because they think that I'm calling them unattractive? It's like, no, it's because they genuinely felt so entitled that they were offended by me being asexual. And that was like the mental gymnastics that you have to do to make sense of that. But it does come from like a network of social expectations that we're all raised to have about each other and about ourselves. So I could understand it, but I was like pissed off that I could understand it.
Oh yeah, that is really sort of eye-opening in a terrible way when you realize that someone is they're essentially saying this aspect of life, sex and attraction to others, is so vital to me and so important to me that I'm angry at you for saying that it's not important to you, because I feel like it's telling me it isn't important at all. And now
and it is partly a gender thing as well, I think, because like I was at that point still presenting in a more feminine way, mostly out of a sense of social obligation. But there is part of those expectations do come from men feeling entitled to female presenting people. And it's, you know, this is kind of also where intersectionality comes in and why intersectional feminism is so important.
Yeah. Well, this kind of relates to the next question on my list, which we were going to talk about something that I've never covered with anybody else, because we, in our conversations leading up to this, we discovered we're both vegetarian.
Yes.
And the reason that this, number one, it's next on my list, but number two, talking about other people saying this is important to me, and I'm angry because you won't incorporate it into your life. I'm gonna kind of set this up and then we can discuss it. But one of the really weird things about vegetarianism and asexuality having these parallels is that there's this idea that we think we're more pure than you if we abstain. So the idea that we're sexually pure or we're health-wise, we're pure if we choose to abstain in these things is kind of based on the idea that sex and meat are both vices, I guess. Very weird. And even though I've never said like I'm better than you because I can resist the temptation of sex, or I'm better than you because I don't get tempted by meat or something, I have seen very, very similar reactions to people who are mad that I don't want to engage in either of their favorite things. So as an asexual vegetarian, do you have any observations on that you want to share or discuss?
Sure. I think it is interesting. I'd never made the connection between the two before, but I have noticed the more I've thought about it, like a tonal similarity in how people talk about vegetarians and vegans before they find out that I'm a vegetarian, and the way that they might talk about, and the way that I've seen people talk about asexuality. And I think it is in a way a purity thing and like a knee-jerk reaction to a stereotype and to a straw man that is, you know, this obnoxious, self-righteous person who, you know, is out to spoil everyone else's fun, despite the fact that like what I eat and what I do or don't do with my body affects no one but me.
Yes.
And like, I'm not here to put that on anyone else. Like, I've never met an obnoxious vegan. I know they exist, but I've met so many people who talk about obnoxious vegans.
Yeah.
And like
who does
so
that?
many people,
Who have you met that does that, right?
Yeah, and I think it's such a dominant figure, this sort of uninformed, irritating person who you know, is just out to guilt everyone else. The stereotype is larger than the actual presence, like of the vegans who I have met, there's about 2 of them. They're really lovely, soft-spoken people who are like really eager to dispel that stereotype.
Yeah.
And are really like upsettingly shy about coming out as vegan.
Right.
Which, yeah, is not to say that there are no shitty vegans out there. Like, no one should be trying to turn their cat vegan, but unfortunately there are people out there trying to turn their cats vegan. Yeah, and it's like, just get a rabbit, just get a vegetarian animal. Like,
yeah.
But it is, I think, people expect for this straw man, for this, you know, for this mythical person to come into their lives and as you say, spoil their fun. So preemptively, almost, people like want to distance themselves from that, and you know, in order to give themselves permission to do something that, you know, that doesn't need to be transgressive. Like, you often hear that it's not possible to live ethically under a capitalist society, and like the meat industry is a huge part of that. Like, a whole lot of human rights abuses and as well as animal rights abuses come out of the meat industry. And that's, you know, I mean, for me, I partly became a vegetarian because it was easy for me to become a vegetarian, because there's no meat that I especially liked the taste of. But I recognize that that's not the case for everybody. Like, for some people, their diets are naturally very restricted because of health concerns. And, you know, in Australia, it is possible to eat meat more ethically by replacing, say, a cow steak with a kangaroo steak, you know. So it's like, I'm not here to tell other people how to eat. I'm not here to tell people that their way of living isn't ethical, any more than I'm here to tell other people that they shouldn't have sex because I don't like it. Like,
Right. People do make a lot of assumptions about why you're asexual or why you're vegetarian also, don't they?
yeah, I think it's comes down again to viewing it as an act rather than as a state of being. Like, I don't choose not to have sex because I'm choosing not to have sex. I choose not to have sex because I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the experience itself is the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for other people, I view myself as a sex positive person because I think that, you know, sex education is really, really crucial and important. Other people being able to have sex, have as much of it as they want, safe, sane, consensual sex, safely, and in a way where they know what they're doing. I feel like that's really important because it is, you know, sex is a transgressive act. It's an expression of agency.
Yeah.
For some people, it relates to their identity. Like, have as much as you want. Like, don't have it with me, but have it as much as you want. Like, and the same thing goes with meat, honestly. Like, if I could convince half my friends, if I was an obnoxious vegetarian who told other people how they should eat, if I could convince half my friends to eat kangaroo steaks instead of cow steaks, or to like explore more native foods or bush foods, like, that would be enough for me. Like, it's personal agency is ultimately more important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's sort of a mystery to me why they get so offended that we don't want to participate. And that they do graft their assumptions, like what you said, the straw man vegetarian or the straw man asexual person who's apparently trying to convert everyone to celibacy. I mean, I don't even think that person exists. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that because I've met some very sex negative people, but I don't know, like I agree with you. I consider myself to be, well, it tends to be a little bit of a loaded term these days, but sex positive is a good term if it means what I mean by it. You know, that I'm not saying, oh, I want everybody to have lots of sex because lots of sex is better for you. I feel like if somebody desires sex and is satisfied by sex, there are no moral implications for why they shouldn't. You know, that they should have access to resources and that they should have a lot of education about consent and opportunities to have safe sex and enjoyable sex with, you know, any willing partner or partners. So,
Yeah.
and it is weird that there are so many people who think it's a contradiction in terms for asexual people to be sex positive. And I guess the parallel in vegetarianism is that kind of, I guess, my reasons for being vegetarian are a mixture of moral and personal, and the moral aspect of it is kind of much more general. It's like I don't want to see animal abuse. I don't want to support industries that torture animals. I give to animal rights charities, that sort of thing. But I also still am not trying to take that choice away from other people. I would rather them make ethical choices in their consumption as much as they can and know where their food is coming from, etc. But I also mostly went vegetarian because I couldn't personally see myself killing an animal and eating it. And I was so put off by that idea that I don't want to pay somebody else to do it. And I am willing to accept that the substitutions are less convenient and sometimes more expensive. That's it.
Yeah. No, I mean, for me, it was like, it's a combination, like in your case, of moral and personal. But the kicker was like when I was 18, so around the same time that I identified as ace, I was having a phone conversation with my sister because like all my family lives in Victoria. I live in a different state. So a lot of our contact is over the phone. And I was having a phone conversation with my sister and we were talking about vegetarianism. For some reason, it had come up in conversation. And I was like, oh, you know, I'd become vegetarian, but I'd miss party pies too much because party pies were like they're such a crappy food, but they're one of those crappy foods that they're like Pop-Tarts almost. They're a party food that you just eat because they're yummy. But I'd miss party pies too much. And she was like, oh yeah, you'd suck at going vegetarian. And I was like, really? Because there's something about your siblings telling you can't do a thing that just suddenly makes it possible. So I did. And yeah, and it turned out to actually be really unexpectedly easy. Like, I don't even miss party pies anymore, I think, because I've realized in hindsight how shitty of a food they are. Which is not to rag on people who are fans of party pies, but at the same time, like, got Buckley's chance of going back to them because it's like no one knows what the meat in party pies is. They're that kind of food. But yeah, and I haven't gone back since because partly a health thing. I learned to cook because I became vegetarian because I had to learn how to cook in order to feed myself things other than pasta and chips. And, you know, I find it meditative and fun now to find new recipes. And, you know, I relate that to being more healthy because I'm eating a more diverse diet of fruit and veg. But yeah, morally, there is a huge, enormous carbon footprint that is associated with eating meat that I think people don't realize the scale of. And there is, of course, the animal rights abuse thing as well. Like live transport is an issue in Australia that a lot of people aren't aware of. It's basically sending livestock like sheep and cows on ships overseas in really crowded, horrific conditions. And of course, there are factory farms here as well. And, you know, the related human rights abuses, like working conditions in abattoirs as one thing. The proportion of workers who are migrants, who face worker exploitation. Like, it really is a serious economic and environmental issue that, like, I had a couple of dumb reasons and some good reasons for going vegetarian. I have no good reasons for going back to eating meat, even taste. It's like, I don't miss it. But again, like, it has to come from a place of personal choice. Like, if someone else changes their mind to become vegetarian, good for them, but I'm not going to try and talk them into it, because trying to talk someone into becoming vegetarian is almost a surefire way of getting them to reflexively be like, no. So, you know, I think allowing people to do their own, sort of go on their own journey of discovery and do their own research, it's like, because it can be an empowering thing as well. Making a huge change in what you decide to eat.
Or you can just get their sibling to tell them they can't do it.
Yeah, oh my God. Like, I don't really get the whole bacon thing, because even when I was a meat eater, I just wasn't really into bacon. But for some people, it seems like, oh, bacon is the thing. Bacon is like the best thing in the world. I'm like, it's not. Bacon's gross. Like, but no, like, meat pies, I don't know, is because I fairly recently found out that meat pies are not an American thing. That you guys don't really have, like, you've got shepherd's pie and stuff, but like meat pie is a huge thing over here. That's the challenge for a lot of people over here, is like, they're almost a cultural staple. They're kind of like Vegemite and Tim Tams. Like, they're the thing that everyone eats. So yeah.
That makes sense.
It is like the size of the ask, realistically, does relate to the importance of letting people make their own decision. But in order for people to make their own decision, like, all the information has to be out there as well. And there is a really strong interest behind people not knowing the scale of abuse that takes place in the meat industry. So, you know, and then activist groups often get really demonized. Like, groups like PETA kind of deserve to be demonized because they're kind of shitty. But then there's, you know, other animal rights activist groups who fall victim to the straw man, like the obnoxious vegan. It's like, yeah, they might be obnoxious, but they're also revealing really, really dangerous, scary abuse that's taking place, you know.
Right.
This is a very easy topic to just go off on.
I love going off on stuff.
It's fun. It is fun. Or not fun, but it feels good, I guess.
Yeah. It's very true though that what doesn't work is shame.
Yeah, no.
And I think that's what they expect us to be doing, both with asexuality and vegetarianism. They're like, we're going to try to talk you into our way of life by shaming the thing that you like and saying that it's bad or that you are an uncontrollable hedonistic monster if you indulge in these things. I mean, if you even look at a lot of advertising associated with food, there's a lot of just indulge in this. It's decadent, like these terms where you're supposed to associate what you eat with sinning or something. And that's also a lot in sex, is that, oh, I'm sinning. No, you're not. You're eating or you're having sex. It's okay. And it's okay with us too.
Yeah. I think there's this, I don't know if this is overthinking it, but I think in the West in particular, there's this very almost slightly puritanical, shameful attitude towards the things that make us happy and the things that bring us joy. So if you're a person who is just super into really luxurious food and super into lots of safe, sane, consensual sex, like that's the wanting of the thing is almost what makes it bad, which is ridiculous, but is also like, it is a social pressure, and it has led to this weird attitude where like almost, you know, wanting a thing that you're not supposed to want adds to the provocativeness of the thing. So it's like this endless cycle of, I don't know, it feels like overthinking it, but at the same time, you know, if there might be something behind that.
That might explain why there's this disturbing undercurrent of, I really want this person to be violated, both with asexuality and veganism or vegetarianism. They're like, I love the idea that I'm going to serve a vegetarian a hamburger and tell her that it's a vegan burger and watch her have the most delicious meal of her life. You know, and I'm like, why do you want that? Why do you want to feed somebody something and lie to them about what it is? They have really just disturbing glee about, I would love this to happen to that person so that I can destroy their purity somehow. And, you know, I mean, not to get graphic or anything, but I have definitely had people either wish that I would experience assault, or I have had people say, I hope she realizes that it's a phase. Once she realizes that sex is great, then she'll never go back, and this whole asexuality phase, this lie, will be gone. Like, they love this idea that we're going to realize what's good and we're going to stop the lie.
I think it's, for me, like, that almost makes me think that it's a response to the idea that vegetarianism or veganism and asexuality are both built on a kind of naivete and a kind of inexperience or a kind of immaturity. And I've certainly encountered the asexuality as an expression of immaturity thing, like this idea that if you have the right amount of sex or the right kind of sex or sex with the right person or sex under the right circumstances or sex as I think you're supposed to have it, like this is somehow going to cure this illness that doesn't exist, because asexuality is not an illness, but like that identifying as asexual is not the result of a culmination of life experiences and learning about yourself, but a lack of those things. And that vegetarianism or veganism is built on this idea that, like, you know, that you're a very innocent person who discovered that chicken burgers are made of actual chickens, and that, you know, you haven't reached this level of maturity where you're able to look past the death of the chicken into the deliciousness of the chicken burger. And it's like, no, I just don't want to eat a chicken burger. And I think that it probably is very satisfying as well to kind of infantilize someone who you view as being very morally righteous. But I don't know, that too also might be overthinking it, or there might be something behind that. It's something that I'd be really interested in looking into and seeing if someone's written about, honestly.
No, I think what you said was not overthinking it, and again, very well said, because I've definitely experienced that far more, though, with asexuality than with vegetarianism. I don't think I've encountered a lot of people who say I'm immature because of it, but I've definitely seen people say it's like a phase college students go through. And once you realize that steaks are delicious, you'll stop this silly thing you're doing, this silly phase. And, you know, I mean, not to bag on my mother, but she has never liked that I'm vegetarian, and also my sister is vegetarian. And there have been a few times where she gets really angry that we don't want to eat like her traditional foods for, say, our Thanksgiving celebration over here. So, and she's gotten upset that she feels like we're rejecting her because we don't eat that anymore, that we don't eat what we were raised on. And
Yeah.
I don't know, I feel like it is really tempting to say, like, I find this thing that you're doing, this thing that's very important to you, to be weird, and all weird things from outside of my experience are a silly kid thing or a phase or a thing you saw on the internet, a fad. And I want to make it that way so that I can continue to perceive it as temporary and my preference as enduring.
I missed the second half of that sentence. Sorry, the connection.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I just said I think that people who say this kind of thing are, they are tempted to say that because of the thing being familiar to them is, this thing is familiar to me, and therefore this thing that you're doing is weird and temporary. And if I can see it as temporary, then I can also see mine, the opposite, as enduring.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I wonder if there's how that interacts with culture, because like in a lot of different cultures and a lot of different ethnic backgrounds, like food is a really important expression of cultural and ethnic background. And like in a city like mine, in a country like Australia, where we are basically very culturally diverse, I wonder if, you know, instead of coming from Scotland, my family had come from somewhere else in the world, and were more kind of alienated because of our ethnicity. Like, would it have been harder for me to become vegetarian if part of cultural expression was related to food? I don't know. It's a big thing to think about.
I like that
but yeah,
too.
and I guess when people hold food as being very, very important to them, that it might feel like for a person to reject meat might feel like a rejection of them. It might feel like a personal rejection.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Or an offensive act for someone to choose not to eat meat for their own personal reasons. Like, it suddenly becomes an attack rather than just a personal choice.
Right. It is weird to me that anybody would place that in, like, well, you're the immature one for having a different belief or a different eating style, because I feel like rigidity and clinging to very specific need for something to be your way does not feel like that would be the more mature, rational way to interact with other people's choices.
Yeah. No, it is. I think because like no one is really as grown up as they think they are, because like human beings just generally, like, we're emotional creatures and we're very emotionally motivated, and we kind of have a reaction and then we rationalize our reaction after the fact a lot of the time. And like, I mean, you know, I like to think that I'm a fairly analytical person, but at the same time, like I said before, I have ADD, so I have like poor emotional regulation, and often I'll have a really strong reaction to something and I'll have to park my bum and sit down and think, okay, is my reaction to this thing proportionate? Is it coming from a place of sense, or is it just coming from, you know, my earphones got caught in the door handle earlier today, so now I'm just really angry. But yeah, I feel like not everyone kind of has the self-reflection to do that, because you know, especially if you're a very privileged person, like, I don't know, if you're a straight white male and you're not used to questioning your own reactions to things, or if you've never been in that many situations where you had to rationalize exactly what you were feeling, you know, you might not realize that having an emotional reaction to someone else being vegetarian is just kind of weird.
Yeah, definitely. The same thing with asexuality, although there have been a lot more arguments in my life on that. But I had relatively recently somebody come onto my channel almost obsessively, just commenting on some videos of mine saying, like, you're so immature, one day you'll grow up and you'll realize that you've been living this extremely regressive life, she said, and that, you know, clearly someone hurt you when you were young, you were not able to succeed in dating, so this was your defense mechanism, and, you know, either you'll realize it and mature and have a healthy life, or you'll be 80 years old sitting in your apartment, which I have a house, not an apartment, but whatever, and, you know, hugging a stuffed animal, she said, and recording letters to an asexual number 600 or whatever it was. And just the idea of that being really satisfying to her, that in both futures I'm pathetic and wrong about myself right now, and that at 42 years old I am immature if I claim to know myself, because it's not what she expects.
Yeah, she sounds like a troll, to be honest.
Yeah, she seemed really inappropriately invested in my life, and that is, again, not something I've ever had to defend against a person that I felt was as mature as I am. I've always felt like people who argue about, are you an adult, are thinking about being an adult in a way adults don't need to. I don't worry about whether somebody thinks I'm a grown up. I'm a grown up, and it's not a question. I'm not worried about proving it.
Yeah, I think that it reveals a certain kind of personal insecurity to feel the need to tell other people that they're being a grown-up incorrectly, or that their relationship with their own personal sexual orientation or their relationships in their life are reflective of, you know, because it almost sounds very self-righteous to say, like, one day you'll agree with me. Like, no, not necessarily. Like, one day you'll grow up and reach my level of consciousness. It's like, how, and like, I'm tempted to believe this person might possibly be a conservative, just because, like, it's an attitude that I've encountered among conservative people more often, that this idea that everyone secretly agrees with them or will one day come to agree with them because their position is the correct one.
Yes.
And it reveals, I think, a lack of broader thinking, like this idea that other people aren't capable of coming to their own conclusions through a process of reasoning and self-exploration. You know.
Yes. I'd agree with that assessment of this commenter as well. I don't pretend to know anything about what she believed politically, but it really did seem like when you have a very static, that's the word I was looking for, when you have a very static view of what is correct and what is acceptable for someone, and you don't have any flexibility built in for accepting diverse populations, then it just means you're going to be angry at people for not being just like you all the time. And how much this person wanted me to understand that I'm wrong about myself. It's just like, you want me to be like you, so you want me to be trolling the internet, looking at people's videos of people that I don't agree with, and telling them that their entire life is a lie. Like, where in that is the upstanding, mature behavior that you think you're embodying?
Yeah, I think that, like, and this is a trait that I suspect, like, I'm obviously not a scholar in this area, but I feel the vibe that I get off trolls generally is that this is a really, like, for your hobby to be looking for people that you disagree with in order to disagree with them more loudly and on the internet, in a way where they're quite physically removed. So the confrontation is almost a safe one, where you can be as ridiculing and as mocking and as rude as you like without actually putting yourself at any personal risk. That really kind of combative, mischievous personality that people put out on the internet, often just so that they can mock other people's identities or habits or ways of living, or just so that they can be like casually racist or casually sexist or casually queerphobic. Like the more combative a person is, generally, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but like it does reveal a kind of insecurity that like this person must feel so unsafe that they have to preemptively defend themselves from other people's opinions all the time. And it's like, I know that like people say this as a response to being bullied, and it does reflect like a feeling of hurt, but like I do feel sorry for people who feel the need to attack other people online in order to feel safe or in order to feel comfortable, because like either that person has been bullied and this is the only way that they know how to interact on a really personal level, or this person anticipates being bullied. And, you know, I kind of wish that I could just sit down face to face in person with this person and be like, I want for you to say what you just said physically to my face, and then I want for you to think about why you said it. You know, I want you to think about why you feel the need to be very antagonistic and to create conflict where conflict doesn't need to exist. Because I feel like if people, like, and this might be like ironically a bit naive of me, but like I feel like if people could kind of sit and empathize and understand on an emotional level the nature of the interaction that they were inviting, they'd be less willing to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it seems very tantrum like to seek conflict as a hobby. And it really does. It makes me think of my niece, who's a toddler, who like a new baby just came home and she doesn't know how to make sense of the fact that all of a sudden her world has changed and this new small vulnerable creature is around and needs all of her parents' attention. So suddenly she doesn't have everything that she used to have, and she's, you know, acting out. Like that's what I picture when I picture someone being self-righteous and rude and nasty on the internet. Like this isn't a person who is well adjusted. This isn't a person who knows how to respond to the world.
That's a surprisingly apt metaphor, actually, because as you mentioned earlier, like people who have been bullied and then also people who feel like they're losing the world they recognize can act out like that and preemptively attack people that they feel represent the changing of the world in ways that they don't like or don't accept. I mean, a lot of that is LGBTQ, that they feel like, I mean, how many times have we heard, why won't you stop shoving it in our faces? And I say, number one, if you're watching one of my videos, you literally shoved it in your own face because you put it up. But number two, like us being interested in having these conversations just like you do as straight people, naturally, authentically, casually, in regular conversation, is not shoving it in your face. I mean, it's just us wanting to have the same opportunities to live in the world and be part of it and be included in it in a meaningful way, just like you. But like you said, I mean, there's a couple of ways you could do it. Number one, they could feel like they're losing control, like a toddler niece, but they might also be saying, I find it entertaining to pick on marginalized people because I perceive that they can't fight back or that they're going to be hurt more by this interaction. This is all a joke.
Yeah.
And
so there's like a sense of gaining power out of it that
I think
they might feel like they don't have, of empowering yourself by being horrible to other people.
That might be part of it. And I think a lot of them that try to say that their trolling is not representative of who they are and this isn't real to them, even though they know on some level that they're talking to a real person who's somewhere in the world hearing and feeling their sentiments, that they still have themselves convinced that on a level it's not really real. and that they're not really like this, and they're just trolling, or they're just looking for a reaction. And I just want to idealistically, like you said, take them into a room by the hand and say, sir, what are you getting out of this? And do you understand what it means that you consistently choose marginalized, vulnerable populations to troll?
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, I think it's a very tricky situation to navigate when you're in the middle of it as well, because I think no one really wants to admit how little control we all have on the internet. Like, considering how essential it has become to everyday life, like it is largely untested ground, and a whole lot of legislation and lawmaking just hasn't caught up with technological capability. So like you've got massive, like, I don't know, this is, I worry that I'm rambling a lot. And this, and again, isn't an area where I'm a specialist, even remotely, but like there is like crime that takes place on the internet that no one knows how to respond to, because to a large extent, the internet is still untested ground for a lot of people. And it's kind of an uncontrolled space. And there is that, you know, sort of utopian image of anything is possible on the internet, but that's also kind of a dystopian image. And like it has been a huge source of pain for so many people who don't know how to defend themselves when they find themselves, you know, under attack from, especially like, I'm not across the language. I don't know. Do you use the phrase dogpiling?
Yes.
Yeah. So like that kind of situation, being a lone solitary person and the police don't know how to help you when you're being dogpiled by trolls, as one example, as one really scary example, because like it very quickly can become a physically dangerous situation. Like there's someone who her boyfriend, her ex-boyfriend, wanted to get revenge, and he was posting her nudes on one of those group chats where people are just horrible to other people's ex-girlfriends, and he was posting comments pretending to be her on like looking for sex websites, forums. I feel like I'm not I can tell you like the book that it's in as well. It's called Troll Hunting. It's by Ginger Gorman. But the anecdote basically ended, he was posting, pretending to be her, asking for people to show up at her house and sexually assault her, and pretending that that was her fantasy. So like he was trying to get this girl assaulted, and there was nothing that she could do legally at the time using the legislation that was available. And like I think he ended up getting arrested on an unrelated charge. I'd need to go back and look this up in order to like bring receipts, but like that's just one narrow scenario.
It's horrifying, especially as someone who's been in a kind of similar situation where someone for 12 days in a row pretended to be me going onto a forum and posted as me. And he
like, how do you respond?
What?
How do you respond?
Well, it's hard because they were doing it on 4chan, which I don't go there, so I'm not going to see it. And then also the nature of 4chan is that posts disappear after they expire. They just disappear, so you can't like save evidence or anything. But I would always know it was happening when I'd start to get hundreds of terrible, violent comments on my videos. And they thought that I was trolling, that I was trying to get attention, that I was posting my own video in their forum. They would say, ask an asexual anything, and provide a link to one of my videos. And then I'd just get all these nasty comments. It was horrible. So, but I guess the person eventually just got tired of doing it because he was doing it every day, and then eventually it would become clear very quickly that he was not me. Like, they would realize based on how we typed and various other things, because he was misrepresenting what I was saying really intentionally and extensively. He even posted a picture of a naked woman and claimed it was me, which she only vaguely looked like me. But he was like, well, as an asexual person, I have no hang-ups about my body like you sexual people, so here's a nude. And I'm like, oh, you think I look like
Jesus.
that? Well, nice. Okay. You know, but
it's like, thanks.
yeah, but I made him look kind of foolish at one point when someone commented on my video and said, like, somebody is sharing your video on 4chan and I have my suspicions as to whether it's you because he makes a lot of typos, but you're an editor. And I'm like, all right, yeah, this person's been doing this because he has no life and he finds it entertaining to try to get me hate mail. I don't know what's in it for him, but you know, it really is funny that people are falling for it, and it's very sad that this is what's entertaining to him. I guess he thought he was showing me something or saying that my identity was fake or something. He even was mad that I wasn't acknowledging that he was getting views. It's like she's so ungrateful she didn't even say anything for all the views I'm getting.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, my videos aren't even monetized. What kind of help is that? I got all these death threats. Thank you. But
yeah.
no, it was really like, you know, there's no way to report that. There have been a couple of incidents that I did report people, and one time I got a lawyer, but that's a whole different story.
Right.
And I won.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad that you came out the other end of that successful and obviously still doing what you do.
Yeah.
And like giving a voice to marginalized groups, because I feel like a big driving force behind people doing that is wanting to silence people who are speaking out and wanting to emotionally exhaust or frighten people, you know, thinking that, oh, maybe if this person gets enough negative attention, you know, they'll realize that no one wants to hear what they have to say. And it's like, well, actually, like, you know, we're here and we're speaking out because we have something really important to say and because we're willing to put ourselves out there in order to be heard and in order to, you know, call for greater representation in the queer community and, and, you know, speak for underrepresented groups and be part of advocating for other underrepresented groups. And ultimately, like, that drive to, you know, have a voice is going to outlive the temporary fear of, oh, but what if someone's mean to me on the internet?
Yeah. And they were, as far as I could tell, harmless, because no one was actually saying, like, here's where she lives, let's go to her house and show her that sex is good or something like that. No, I didn't ever get anything like that, at least not in that situation. But I did have a few accusations that because I deleted and blocked hateful and aggressive and troll comments, that I was afraid of them. And I'm like, what? I mean, what do you actually think the proper way to handle something like this is? I'm responding to anyone who appears to have an authentic question. But if you're just here to say something really trollish about my body or make a commentary about why are all asexuals ugly like this bitch, you know, I'm not interested in engaging with you. This is not a free speech issue. This is, you're trying to harass me. You're trying to intimidate me off the internet. And good luck, boy. It's not going to work.
Yeah, I think that's another.
That you want to do that is part of the reason I'm here.
If there is like a troll culture on the internet, I wonder how much of it is just flexing almost on like how big of an asshole you can be, and like flexing by painting assholery, acknowledging that you're being a jerk, but like painting it somehow as a brave act, as like speaking truth to power, as like wanting to be the underdog almost in these, you know, interactions where you're seeking out a fight on the internet from behind the computer screen. Like it's, I don't know, it makes me think. So there's someone who I've only just encountered on YouTube, and she's been doing it for a while. Her YouTube handle is ContraPoints.
Oh.
And yeah, I haven't watched that many of her videos, but the ones that I have watched I found really, really interesting. And she almost seems to be addressing directly this audience of angry young men on the internet who are looking for a fight to pick and who are looking for an underdog identity to embody. I'm trying to think, what was the first one that I watched? Anyway, she was really interesting. And, you know, if anyone finds this kind of topic really interesting, I feel like maybe that would be another place to go to move on to after this. I don't know. Brain fart.
I have not personally watched any of her videos, but I have seen some noise about some cancel culture stuff that she seems to be kind of on the opposite side from me on some of these things. So I'm not really quite sure what her situation is with that, or if that's a more recent development or what. But, you know, I align very much with leftists, and I've seen some of these conversations where they didn't like something that she did or said, and I cannot claim knowledge of it. So I'm just going to say that. But I think that part of the reason that she did get such a following is that she did do a deep dive into troll behavior, right?
I think so. She's spoken a lot about interrogating some of the ideas behind some really common, really outspoken alt-right, positions that people take on politics, on identity, on, you know, whiteness and culture. And she's, from memory, she's American. She's based in the States. So that's her cultural perspective. And she's also genderqueer, which is super cool.
That is cool. We need more of that in mainstream in any case.
Yeah.
I really would like to see more of that. Just, I don't know, I've seen a few of my favorite pieces of media just casually use they, them pronouns lately, and I appreciate that. I think it's great to have like issue books and issue stories and issue documentaries, but also very cool to just have it completely casually and never explained or gone into. There's no very special episode where so and so comes out as genderqueer or whatever. You know, it's just
yeah. Yeah, and that's a huge part of normalizing is literally just representing a person as being normal in a space and not having to justify their presence. Like, that's, I feel like there's a Tumblr post that's gone around that has 50 squillion different likes or something, that is basically like, when we say we want more, you know, lesbian stories and more queer stories and more ace representation, like, we mean fantasy books and historical novels and, you know, and science fiction, and not more of queer person goes to conversion therapy camp and has a bad time. Like, we've got plenty of that.
Right, or something tragic where they die at the end.
Yeah.
Bury your queers. Yeah, that's enough like real life. We don't need more.
Yeah, it's like, I don't want to be sad. I just want to read a gay version of The Hobbit.
There you go. I mean, I'd be down. I mean, some people would say that The Hobbit is already a gay version of The Hobbit, but
yeah. I mean, every possible ship, pretty much. All guys.
Yeah. I once had an internet argument about representation in stories because somebody had a realistic fiction young adult novel where the main character was gay and he was attracted to another boy in his school, and they got together, and there was never any like homophobia. It was never even touched on. He didn't experience it. He didn't fear it. There was no suggestion that it existed in his world, but otherwise it was our world. There was no like, oh, this is a fantasy world where there's no homophobia. And the person told me that they didn't like this representation because it doesn't acknowledge the reality of queer relationships in high school and how there's always this danger. And I kind of disagreed because, if you're wanting it to be a realistic portrayal, you're probably eventually going to run into somebody who is a jackass to you about your queer identity. But
Yeah.
I fundamentally disagree that every young adult novel has to include homophobia in the name of realism. Like, maybe we just want a fluffy gay story where like they get to fall in love, and it's not like a bad thing that it's ignoring an aspect of reality to give us that. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think it's more important to have more queer stories ultimately. Like, I understand the frustration of wanting for the reality of the queer experience to be represented. And I feel like that is a valid point insofar as, you know, sugarcoating something is almost as bad as misrepresenting it in some cases. Like, and there are people out there who think that queer people don't suffer or don't suffer enough. But for queer audiences in particular, being able to have those stories that are true to their experience so that they can relate to them and is equally important as having stories that are positive and that don't portray their experiences as being defined by suffering.
Yes.
And that's kind of the argument. It's like, we need more queer representation. We don't need different queer representation. We just need more, you know, because there is a diverse range of different experiences that people have. Like, my experiences as a non-binary ace person are very different to the experiences of someone who, like, I don't know, who lives in the States as an example, but who is also non-binary and ace. Like, I grew up in a regional area. Like, I grew up in the lower socioeconomic bracket. Like, I'm currently living in a rented house with 4 other people. Like, my economic situation has a relationship with my identity. And, you know, the more material is out there for me to relate to myself and other people, the better. And some of it should be positive, you know.
Or at least if there's some kind of stress or conflict, which there is in all good literature, that it's not derived from, oh no, we're queer and people hate us.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Or like some kind of situation where the interrelationship problems that they have are derived directly from being queer. It's just like, we have those sometimes, but we also have all the same stuff everybody else deals with. So,
yeah,
you know.
Yeah, like it's like, I wanted when I was a younger queer person to be, not to be seen as, you know, as being my gender or sexual orientation. Like, when I first came out in high school, I came out as bi, as previously mentioned, because that was my first kind of queering of myself. And I came out to people because I wanted to be honest about it, but I didn't want to be defined by it. And part of that was because I was relentlessly bullied in high school for being the bi person. But part of it was also like, there is so much more to who I am that doesn't mean that I don't want to be known as being bi, but I don't want for that to be my defining feature. And, you know, that I still feel very much that way. Like, and again, like I said earlier, I'm really fortunate in the social circle that I have in the city that I live in, that I'm in, for the most part, a really safe environment where I have the luxury of doing that. And, you know, everyone deserves to have this kind of choice to just be who you are and choose whether or not to come out based on personal preference, as opposed to it being a question of physical safety.
100% agree. I think that could take us into the next question that I have on my list, actually, because I wanted to talk next about the most difficult things about being ace. So if you have any that tie into what we're talking about or go off in a different direction, I'd love to hear about your experiences with that.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I just looked at the clock and realized that it was 12, which isn't, I'm not saying that I have somewhere else to be, but just saying, like, to say thank you for letting me ramble so much, because I know that I've rambled a lot.
Oh, well, the last video that I posted was about 2 hours long, so I'm really enjoying that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's with asexuality, I feel like that's the most dire question, is the question of like the question of safety, personal safety. It's like we touched on earlier, a lot of people see coming out as ace as being a direct challenge, which for some people can lead to some really, really unsafe situations. And even before a person comes out as ace, you know, you're almost in more danger because you don't have the language or the framework or the understanding to defend yourself from, you know, you might fall victim the way that I did and the way that a lot of other people have, to feeling like you're withholding something from your partner if you don't do this thing that they really want to do, or that you're insulting your partner somehow if you don't give them this thing that they really want from you, and that is a core part of romantic relationships. Because so many people do tie in romance with sex and treat them as being essentially the same thing. Like if you are attracted to someone and you want to be with them and you want to commit your time and your energy to them and you want to be close to them, it follows that you must want to have sex with them. And it's like, no. And it's really hard to convince someone when you're not even able to convince yourself. Like, I do want to be with you, I just don't want to sleep with you ever. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like when my friend conducted the survey, this was one of the scenarios that arose the most often, was people not knowing how to tell their partners no. And like, that's really horrible. Like, that's dreadful. Yeah. Because, you know, the person who loves you and the person who you love shouldn't be the person who makes you feel the most unsafe. And that's a really confusing position to be in, to feel unsafe around someone that you love, because you don't know how to tell them, I am attracted to you, but not in the way that you understand attraction. Mm-hmm. And like, this is partly why having, like, people need to have communities where they are not the only one of them. Like, I needed to discover Avon when I did, so that I could kind of tell myself, like, the way I am is fine. I don't need to change for anyone. I don't need to put myself in really deeply upsetting situations for anyone. Like, it's, I mean, on a really basic level, it's a human right to feel safe. And, you know, that's a really serious, that's the most serious part of being ace for me, is being able to say that, you know, asexuality is a sexual orientation and it is normal, and it's not something that has to be fixed. It's not something that has to be corrected. It's not, you know, a personal offense to somebody else. Mm. And the second most serious actually was medical interventions. So a lot of people who responded to the survey responded with, for instance, there was a woman, she was in her mid-30s and she had a UTI go undiagnosed for a long time because it had been misdiagnosed as an STI. And she told her doctor, I'm not sexually active, I've never had sex. And her doctor told her, you're sexually active whether you admit it or not. And she got misdiagnosed. And this was not the only scenario in the survey that rose like this. Like, people had really, really like confronting encounters with doctors and with medical professionals and with psychologists. There were people who had their unwillingness to have sex or their lack of a libido treated as a symptom. Someone got taken off their antidepressants by their doctor because they had a lowered libido, despite the fact that the antidepressants were working and were helping them. Like, the pathologizing of a person's identity puts them at risk. And, you know, this is another thing that asexual people share with other queer identities. Like, one of the biggest dangers facing the intersex community is the fact that intersex people are treated as if they have a disorder, and like, that puts them in really unsafe situations as children, as infants, when they can't speak for themselves. And I remember having a conversation with an intersex friend where we were both just talking about these interactions we've had with people where we were both being told, like, there is something wrong with you and you need to be fixed. And it was like an outlet for both of us, and we kind of bonded over it. But yeah, those are two very major problems to have for a community that gets told that it doesn't have problems. And part of why it's important that we listen to each other and that we make sure that we're heard.
Yes. Yeah, piggybacking off of what you said about the interpretation of asexuality as a symptom by medical professionals, I think this is a good example of, or a good way to answer, I guess, when people say that asexual people do not or cannot experience institutional oppression because maybe they don't yell any slurs at us while they beat us up or whatever. But you know, I do think that even though it's definitely a touchy subject, and it's not something where I want to try to measure who has the worst time of it or play oppression Olympics or anything, but I think a lot of queer people who are more well recognized, more mainstream queer identities will recognize that medicalization and the tendency for medical professionals and therapists, mental health practitioners to say, just by definition, if you're not desiring sex, we have to fix that. We have to do something to you. And it's so important that we get you to want sex and pursue sex and express that you want it. It's so important that we can and will sacrifice other aspects of your health to make sure that that is prioritized.
Yeah, and even like the willingness to expose people to trauma and to not acknowledge that it is trauma. Like 2 separate people from different countries who responded to the survey got diagnosed with vaginismus, which for people who aren't aware of what that is it's a reproductive condition of a sort. And one of the treatments that both of these people were subjected to involved penetration.
Yes.
So basically, the treatment for, this condition that they both supposedly had, one of the main symptoms of which is pain during intercourse, was to subject them to the thing that they found really traumatic.
Yes.
And, one of these people had identified as asexual and had been told by her boyfriend that she was just using it as an excuse not to have sex, and that if she didn't seek treatment, he would leave her. And in the case of the other person, she heard about asexuality years after the fact. And in both these people's cases, it's like these people really needed community. They really needed support. They really needed to be told that the way they were was fine.
Yeah. And when you don't get that, you have lots of suffering. You have people who either live very like lonely, frustrated, confused lives, or you have people who just kind of bite their lip and decide everybody else must be right and put up with relationships or experiences in those relationships that they've been told are their duty. It happens a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that therapists and doctors and mental health practitioners in general, sometimes they are not up on what the latest is for the standards of what constitutes a disorder when it comes to asexuality. Because I mean, now you're not supposed to say that if somebody identifies as asexual that they might have sexual aversion disorder or something like that. But I mean, the way that it's written, you basically have to take the asexual exemption. You have to know.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because
no.
Yeah, like asexuality is referred to in the most recent DSM.
Yes.
But there are a lot of scenarios still elsewhere in the DSM where an aversion to sexual activity or a low libido is described as a symptom. So it's like it's almost up to the medical professional how they want to interpret what's written. And like that again is where, sort of cultural perception comes in. Like if this person identifies this as a problem, are they identifying it as a problem because they are normally a very sexually active person who wants to be more sexually active, or are they identifying as a problem because they've been told that it's a problem?
Right.
Like, yeah, people need to have the option of knowing that they can just not want to have sex and still be a whole person. And the problem is that so many people don't know that, and they're not told that. Like, there's a whole lot of pressure on people to be sexual beings, and the problem isn't the sexuality, the problem is the pressure.
Yep. Yeah, the distress is, as a symptom, is too generalized. It's like, am I distressed because everybody's mad at me because I won't sleep with them, or am I distressed like inherently because I want this? And it breaks down into even more nuance when, you know, maybe you don't really mind sex so much, or you might even enjoy it, but you're really alienated by the fact that you just don't desire it or feel that attraction the way that your partner does. And you're like, what's wrong with me? Like, I would love to be desiring this, but I'm just not. And there's a disconnect there that I feel like I'm broken, or is something wrong with my relationship? Is something wrong with me physically? So the community and knowledge, facts, all of that it is really important for just medical professionals to be able to properly take care of us when we trust them. I had I don't want to go into, you know, too many details because I don't want to spray someone's personal story all over the internet, but I did briefly talk to someone who had like a hormone variation. It was a congenital issue that, you know, so he was always being seen by like a hormone specialist and whatever. And when he got old enough to have the expected attractions, and he did not, and he was, you know, expected to start wanting to chase girls because they're so heteronormative and whatnot, and he didn't. They kept giving him more testosterone to try to make him attracted, and it turned out that eventually when he did more research, he understood what asexuality was, and he switched doctors. He was told, like, the dose you were on was dangerous. Like, I'm surprised that you're alive. You know, just plus he said that he felt so like angry and frustrated and aggressive and couldn't sleep, and just he became distressed, I should say, to avoid any specifics. But, you know, my experience talking with him, like, I don't think I had heard anything quite like that before, but I have heard also from a couple of women who were given hormones, were given specifically testosterone to increase their sex drive because they didn't know how to express it besides, I don't want to have sex and I know I should, what's wrong with me? And they're just like, oh, well, this is what you need, sex drive.
Which is, I mean, so many people have gone through so many different treatments for so many different things that weren't a problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like many years ago,
like,
I mean, you could get diagnosed with being a woman.
Like, the doctors just really it's hysteria. No, wait.
Yes.
Yeah.
You were saying?
Sorry, you froze for a bit, so I think I might have actually been talking over you without realizing that I was talking over you.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think doctors get confused because, especially when they don't know, that they can just tell a patient, look, you can just not bang. You can just not want to bang. That's okay. Especially when the person themselves is like, I have been told all my life that I gotta want to bang. Like, that's gotta be the thing. And, you know, it is a very fraught conversation that is so personal. So, you know, I've never met someone who was, which isn't to say that they don't exist, but I've never met someone who was told by someone else specifically that they were ace. Like, I've met plenty of people who discovered it for themselves or who heard it mentioned and went off and did further research. It's always been like a decision that people came to. And that's, you know, part of what makes it difficult, I guess. Ultimately, people should have agency and the ability to choose and to come to their own decision, but it is a longer journey.
I think so. I've heard from some people who said, oh, well, you're experiencing that, maybe you're asexual, and they look it up and they're like, huh, never heard of this. But I think that it's more likely that someone has been wondering for a long time, why am I not like my peers? And they eventually find it themselves.
Yeah. No, there's always more to it, and I wouldn't want to make it sound either like no one can just go up to someone else and to say, hey, I think that maybe the fact that you don't want to have sex is really, really obvious and really not a problem. Like,
that'd be nice.
Just be single forever or don't sleep with your partner. You can do that. You
Yeah,
can do
that
either one of
is
those.
an option. You know, interestingly, that anecdote that you shared about one of the people who answered your survey, where she was told by a doctor that she is sexually active regardless of whether she'll admit it, that was it kind of reminded me of a couple of medical interactions that I've had where, like, I guess I was having, I can't remember exactly what I was having investigated. Like, I think it turned out to be very typical fibroids or something, your uterine stuff or whatever. But they always ask you if you're pregnant, and they always want to know, are you sure, blah, 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 because of x-rays or whatever else. And, you know, it's fine. But because I said that I knew I was not pregnant, and then they wanted to know, what birth control am I on? And I said, I am not on birth control. I am abstinent. And they were like, and this was a male doctor. And he says, oh, and he just kind of looks at me, and I can see the wheels turning. And then he's like, okay, well, just so you know, I'm also wanting to know if you use any, prophylactics or whatever else, like what also, it also applies if you're talking about sex with women. And I'm like, I'm not. I also would consider sex with a woman to be sex.
Means.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I assure you there are no lesbians out there who believe themselves to be abstinent because it doesn't involve, like, a man. But anyway, he did whatever, his exam or whatever. And then at the end of it, he, not so subtly, gave me a business card for a psychologist and said, if you ever need to talk to anyone. And I was like, well, I know why he did that. And I haven't thought about that in a while, but that was a pretty good example of, he didn't force it on me or anything. He didn't say, like, something's wrong with you, you need to get that checked out. But, he worried that I had psychological issues if I was the age I was, and he didn't see any reason why I would be unlayable. So he believed that I should be laying. And,
like a chicken, you must lay. You're of
yes.
laying egg.
And they,
I don't know. It's because he probably meant it in a supportive way as well, and didn't mean it in a pathologizing way. But at the same time, it should not have factored into, or I guess the fact that you're being abstinent factored into his assessment of your mental health reveals how rooted in, even in the scientific community, how rooted in, people's idea of what a healthy person looks like, where sex fits into that, the fact that it's seen as necessary, or as indicative of a person's health.
Right.
It's scary.
Right. Oh, I as soon as you say that, you're a troubled person. It's a little bit weird. The other incident that I had was just pretty funny, where I was in the emergency room because of a problem with, I don't know, my heartbeat was really fast for a really long time, and I didn't know why. So I went to the emergency room, and my mom was with me because I don't drive, and so she drove me there. And it was just getting checked out, and of course, since I'm a lady, they just said, you probably have anxiety. Never really found out what the issue was. It was like an ongoing thing. I don't know why it went away eventually, but
wow.
But anyway, they do all this usual questions and stuff like that. And my mom she's a character. And when I said I was not on any birth control or anything, when they're asking about my medications, my mom is just like, yeah, she's a virgin. And the nurse looks over and says, yeah, right, Mom. It's cute that you think she is. And I'm like,
It's like, just
Yes.
gonna leave that there.
Yes, at this point I'm in my late 30s and can't deny that. Not interested really in disclosing that, but I'm not ashamed of it. I also think virginity is a really just ridiculous concept, but
It
anyway.
is. I'm a huge proponent of the idea that virginity is 100% a social construct.
It's ridiculous.
It's purity politics. It's like there is no benchmark for what you have to have done that everyone agrees on. Like there is no physical indicator of like of whether or not it's there. It's an idea. It like exists wholly in a person's mind.
That's true. Yeah. I have actually heard like cisgender men say that all lesbians, if they've only ever had sex with other cis women, that they're all virgins. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Mm.
They think it
It's just
requires.
it's a way of making themselves the center of the narrative. I think it's
Yeah,
another like insecurity thing of just
right.
like, well, if it's not about me, then it's not real.
Right. And that figures into like the poly communities too, where some of them are like, yeah,
Mm.
I'm fine with multiple partners, but one penis policy, you can have other girlfriends and I can have other girlfriends, but no other men. I guess if you want to like assume that he also would be rejecting trans women if they had penises.
Yeah.
He would consider them men, which would also be ridiculous. But anyway,
Yeah.
it'd be an interesting way to get around that. but, but
Just
you
on a
should
technicality.
you shouldn't let people like that direct anyway. Like if
Yeah.
anyway, yeah. A lot of them are very fixated on like, yeah, I'm totally open to multiple relationships and poly, and I'm real hip with this. But I
Foiled
actually
by
think
their
of this
own
as my hero.
transphobia.
What?
I like the idea of someone being foiled by their own transphobia, of
Yeah,
their own like not factoring in the entire trans community.
yeah. Unfortunately, I really hate the way that manifests sometimes in my country because of like there was a trans woman who got arrested for indecency because she had her top off. So she got
Jeez.
arrested, and then they're like, "Oh, well, you're trans," and they put her in the men's jail. And I'm like,
Oh Jesus.
okay, so make up your mind. If she's a man and she belongs in man's prison, then she was topless in public as a man, and that's not disallowed. So wait,
Yeah.
like her boobs are still vulgar and offensive, but you don't accept that she's a woman. That doesn't work.
Mm. I mean, this is part of why I think a lot of people, like, not to speak for the entire queer community, but a lot of people were not that vocal over here, at least, about June, about Pride Month, basically being swamped in the media by Black Lives Matter, because, like, that is a huge issue, and, like, clashes with the police are something that the queer community has always shared with communities of color. And, like, until there is justice for all of us, there's justice for none of us. Like that kind of, I'm a huge believer in that.
Yes.
And the trans community is like one of the most targeted when it comes to police. Like there is that whole, the phenomenon of the charge of walking while trans.
Yeah.
Like how trans women often get pulled in for, soliciting sex work just because they're existing in public, and like police read that as, oh, you look like a prostitute because you don't look how I expect a person your shape to look.
Right.
And it's really like it does present a threat to the whole community. And I mean, police brutality is disproportionately in Australia, and I know that like in other countries as well, but in Australia it's disproportionately an issue faced by Aboriginal and Black communities, and also by queer communities. And I feel like this is like a tangent, but it's an important tangent, and something there's always space for it in the conversation, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, as aces, I mean, a lot of us have these other identities that we can be visibly queer sometimes as well. And I think there's this common misconception that any ace person is basically assumed straight or something if they don't have a visibly same-sex partner. But like I don't know if you've noticed, I'm sure you have, but a lot of us are very visibly queer, especially in our groups and stuff like that. And so like, this is kind of part of the whole conversation of what is very difficult about being ace is that I think most of us don't just want the support of the queer community, we also are subjected to some of the same risks existing as ourselves in public. And as, as white people, we are never as at risk as the people who are our same identities who are not white. But because of, like we mentioned before, about that marginalization being a window into how it can manifest for other groups, I think it's very easy to see why existing can become a crime.
Yeah, it is. And like, there's always going to be the importance of reading outside your own experience, but like reading inside your own experience as well. Like I know a number of ace people in person who have, approached the police for help in a domestic abuse situation that was related directly to their being ace. And the police were not willing to help them. And in at least one of those people's cases, it was because the police did not believe them when they said that they were asexual, and that this was a factor in, like, because she was experiencing sexual assault.
Right.
And the police officer's unwillingness to believe that she did not want to sleep with her partner, and like her experiences were as she was describing them, she attributed that to being the reason why she was unable to get help. So it's like, and that's just a situation involving the police, and like we've covered other situations involving medical professionals and situations where, we have the same or similar experiences to other queer people in being erased or being marginalized or being told that we're doing it for attention or that we just want to be special. And it can get very frustrating to be told, you don't belong in this space, or, come back when you've checked off XYZ items on my list of reasons why people are allowed in the queer community. Because, like one queer person's experience will never look the same as another person's experience. Like the queerness is in the marginalization, not in the specific scenario.
Yes, it's an overall effect, not necessarily an individual experience.
Yeah.
And the cases that you're describing, basically the people who are denying that we belong there are doing the same thing that police person did in saying, I don't believe this happens to you.
Yeah, it's the erasing of the experience and the refusal to believe that a person is telling the truth about themselves. And it's maybe that's coming from a place of wanting to defend themselves against like it's horrible that this is happening, but if I can tell myself that it's not happening, that this person is just lying, then I get to be comfortable today. And, it's the consequence of that, unfortunately, is that a person is unable to get help. It's like all that person had to do was be willing to believe that assault was taking place. And, that could have been partly also because the person was female, and that like,
yes,
women's experiences with police when it comes to reporting sexual assault are often fraught. But, I guess the reason why I initially brought that up, because this has been another ramble. I feel like I've rambled a lot.
Keep it up. As long as you're comfortable.
No, definitely. Like, I feel like it's important to talk about that these are issues that we share, and like when white people do the whole like all lives matter thing, like that's it's all you've got to do really is say like, well, think of a time when you interacted with the police and it was unpleasant. Like, that these people do not always have everyone's best interests at heart. That they are human beings who make mistakes. And in the case of in the US, like people are given an awful lot of power with not enough training, and you know, in a situation where there's like institutionalized racism as a factor in, this is like a really big complex issue, and I feel like I'm butchering it, but it's like, the problems will go away when they're solved, you know. And when people say that, you know, they're tired of hearing, or, you know, when they sort of fail to take these things seriously, it comes from a place of not understanding what's at stake.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think you're right that also them not getting enough training is not even necessarily a judgment of the individuals who feel like they do the best they can. You can't possibly be trained on how to handle somebody that has a certain disability or is mentally disturbed or whatever. You know, if they have a mental illness that makes them act out or whatever, they're not necessarily going to be able to understand that that's not a person on drugs, or, you know, a person who is combative in a typical violent way. They're not going to necessarily understand the ins and outs of queer relationships. They're not going to understand how to handle maybe somebody that's visibly trans and they're like having like confusion or feeling like somebody's impersonating somebody else. Like they'll have all these different experiences that they bring to it with no specific training on how to handle people that they're going to encounter in the field, and then they're still going to be asked to solve the problem. And a lot of times they're doing that in a completely unacceptable way by assuming that the person that they're dealing with is violent or has the worst possible interpretation of whatever their actions are.
Yeah, and there is also, I think, at this point, I feel comfortable saying there's a proven culture problem. The police in particular, like the Black community in Australia is hugely overrepresented in Australian prisons, despite like proportionately not representing the same in outside of. I'm really not explaining myself well today. Basically, police have a problem with Black people, and that is the police's problem. And that's like, that is a culture problem. And when you're kind of not hardwired, but when you naturally perceive someone as being more of a threat based on the color of their skin, to be the person holding the gun in that situation, like, I understand people wanting to stick up for the police because they see the police as sticking up for them, but the police aren't the people who are vulnerable right now. They're not the people who need to be defended right now from what they are doing. Like, the institution itself needs to change, both in the States and here in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's, yeah, I don't know.
Oh, 100% agreement. And, you know, we, as queer communities, like, we do have a history of similar demonization by law enforcement. So, I mean,
yeah, like, it's like that. There was a flag that I saw someone waving around, which made a very good point, which is just Stonewall was a riot.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yes, it was. I mean, the whole point of it was not gay marriage. It was police brutality. It was they're shutting down our bars over and over again violently and arresting people for things that are not illegal. And they just get away with it because, well, these are a bunch of perverts, because they're men dressed up as women and they're gays. And that's how they perceive them. Like, we can drag them off to jail because they're marginalized people. And a lot of them were Black. A lot of them were Black women, you know, trans women, and people of color. So it's just that intersection there is really I won't say the entire backbone, but a large part of the backbone of modern queer activism, because it's always been built on marginalization and inclusion, despite the marginalization, like the recognition of the humanity of each other.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of, it's very hard at the moment, especially with COVID and with everything that's going on, to envision what the future might look like. and what a more constructive, less harmful system might look like. I know that like getting rid of police stations altogether is something that people are talking about in the US, not as much here, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost simultaneously a moment of huge optimism and hope and major dread, because how like people don't realize discussions have been going on for a long time of what could replace the police, like what could render this institution unnecessary, and a lot of it is like community support. And
Yes, 100%. And I've been following that discussion, and it goes back so
yeah,
far.
yeah, and a lot of it is just changing infrastructure
Mm-hmm.
because so much of crime that takes place, it doesn't take place because people want to be criminals, it's because they don't have access to the resources that they need.
Yes.
It's because they don't have access to help. You know, it's like the same reason that the war on drugs has failed is because you know, you're tackling the issue from the wrong end. So there's a lot of hope, I think, that people have about how this problem could be solved, but there is a lot of neurosis surrounding it as well. And there's a lot of fear, because despite the fact that the police as an institution is historically very recent, it's also something that we can't really picture our lives without, because the police have also come to form such a source of stability and of institutional stability for so many people, and for so many privileged people in particular. And it's kind of that status which lends them the power to further marginalize and to punish people for whom they're not a figure of stability but a figure of fear.
Yes, I do think that a lot of the things that police are kind of currently overburdened to take care of could be better handled by people who are not, you know, coming to stop a crime, you know, like that they're not thinking in that perspective, or they're not armed with a gun in the United States anyway, but you know, just de-escalation and, you know, things that, you know, police, in fairness, they are not trained to do these things in general. They're, like you said, with the war on drugs, I mean, you don't look at why somebody would resort to drugs or how they got addicted or how to help them. You're like, oh, well, that's illegal, so we're going to put you in jail, and that'll stop it. And it's like, well, that person's life is ruined though.
Yeah, I mean, there's that. There's also like, if it's, so there's this thing that's happening at the moment. It's kind of been a hot topic here for a little while, is the topic of pill testing. And I don't know if this is as a big thing in the States as it is in Australia. It's basically at music festivals, and it's a state legislation issue. So like in Victoria, they might have it. In A.C.T or New South Wales, they might have it. Somebody set up, I think they're trialing it either in New South Wales or the A.C.T. Like they've trialed it in the past in other states and it's worked. Basically, say you've got a music festivals, people are going to have drugs at music festivals. Say there is a tent where you can get your pills tested. And it's basically so that you can find out if they are toxic, if they're going to make you sick. And the tents double as they both provide this service, they provide information, like they're staffed by health professionals, by people who are trained in like discussing drug use and safe drug use with people, with young people. And like whether or not, like their job is not to stop a person from taking a pill, it's to provide people with information. And in past trials, this has been really successful. But this approach isn't legal in all Australian states.
I see.
Like it is proven to be more effective and less harmful than greater police presence. But the approach in most Australian states is to have greater police presence and greater regulation of music festivals. So it's like, and this is just like one tiny example out of many where you could just replace the police with something that we know works better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway, this has been a heck of a tangent.
I think it's relevant still in some way. Yeah, so like after all of that discussion of some of the negative experiences you have had and we've had conceptually as a society and intersectionally, I would love to kind of come into the closing here with talking about the good stuff. Like, well, let's start with discussing what the best things about being ace have been for you.
So, I mean, finding yourself for anyone, one of the best things about it is finding a community. So in the case of my city, like a friend of mine started about 2.5-3 years ago, she started a local ACE group, which has turned into a Facebook group that is about almost 200 people strong, I think, from memory, which like for our city isn't bad because it's a smallish city as well. We're not a massive community, but it proves that, like, you know, when you reach out to people, when you make resources available, the people are there. It's just, you know, finding the right thing to bring people together.
Right.
So that's been really nice. Being able to speak to other people who have similar experiences, like reinforcing the idea that, you know, who you are is okay, and that other people have the same experiences and that you can kind of bond over that. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of like, how do you enact ace positivity aside from just by joyfully enjoying things that are not sex? It's like the whole cake thing, the whole cake motif. It's like, I have mixed feelings about the cake motif, actually, because it's just like, I don't need things to be better than sex for me to enjoy them. Everything is better than sex. Not having sex is better than sex.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and I had mixed feelings about it too, but like, I understand where it's coming from. There's, you know what, let's bond together over something we would much rather do than that.
Yeah, I think, and there is a large component of ace positivity that is just the assertion of your own identity, and the having found yourself and being able to call yourself a normal human being, and being able to kind of come to terms with yourself and feel whole and feel like there's nothing wrong with you is like such a joyful thing to discover when, you know, you felt kind of off kilter or like suspecting yourself of something being wrong your whole life. Sure. Unfortunately, like, I'm now, given that I've identified as ace for 10 years, I'm kind of removed from that experience, but I can still remember very much feeling like that.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling like that in relation to my own gender identity. And, you know, the feeling of kind of relief when I found the language to communicate, like, I am non-binary, you know, and, you know, the positivity in that is just the freedom to express yourself.
Yeah.
Which is a bit more of an abstract concept and hard to explain at times.
I relate to what you're saying because it is sort of a fraught issue sometimes because of it being kind of perceived to be about a lack or an abstention in your life. Like, how do you celebrate something that you don't do? This is something that you see a lot of people criticizing us over, is like, oh, do I need a group for people like me who don't like soccer? You know, stuff like that. But I'm like, well, if you spent the majority of your life feeling incredibly alienated and having everybody around you trying to like harass you into playing it or watching it, then yeah, sure. But if you started a club that I didn't think was necessary, I also wouldn't be trolling your comments. So, but the problem that I've kind of had trying to celebrate aceness with some other people is it's really tempting for some of them to end up in sex negativity categories, and that gets uncomfortable for especially some people who enjoy sex as part of their relationships or whatever. And I don't know, sex positivity is such a weird thing too, because it's in essence what we want to do, but we don't want to push this narrative that like we're just like everyone else and we also compromise, it's fine, you know. I mean, that's almost exactly what they want us to think in mainstream narratives, you know, like, oh, it's not really an issue because you'll compromise, right? Like for your relationship. But that I don't want to sound too negative about it because this is like the positive section, but
Yeah.
I have occasionally had to ask people not to celebrate their perception of their experience of asexuality in certain ways because of the way it shames other people. They're just like, sex is dirty. I'm so glad that I'm not one of these animals who desires sex like a bunny that just wants to mate all the time. It's so nice to be above that and to be enlightened. And I'm like, you know, I want to create a safe place for you to enjoy the fact that you don't participate in this aspect if that's what you're trying to celebrate, but leave off like the snotty comments about other people, you know, because I don't support that.
Yeah, I'd be tempted to suspect that that kind of response is possibly coming from very young people who are kind of, there still might be, because for me this was certainly the case. Like I don't think I was ever especially sex negative because I've always been surrounded by really sex positive people. So like being like, oh, the best thing about being ace is that I'm not sex mad, like has never really been a reaction that I've thought to have. But because I was quite almost defensive and, you know, possessive of my newfound asexuality once I realized that it was a thing, because I was so happy to have found it. And I'm thinking that maybe young people who have kind of found that for the first time, if putting themselves in opposition to others is like a goal to have that kind of attitude and to express pride in that way, in a very competitive way, like maybe that's where that's coming from. But I guess it could just as easily be coming from like an older person who just is kind of a dick or is kind of, you know, maybe a little bit emotionally immature.
Yeah, well,
I don't know.
I guess nuance is always really important, and I do feel like if you're asexual and you feel like maybe your asexuality is part of your spiritual practice or something, say, then okay, great, this is a part of who you are, and so is breathing, and so is your choices about what you eat, and so are your choices about whether you have sex or not. And all of these things are choices that you might associate with a belief system that may be spiritual. But while I can say, okay, that is great and I will support that, I'm not going to support it if you're going to say we as asexual people who don't desire sex are more evolved than the rest of the world. And I can't get with that. I'm like, you can incorporate that into your own spiritual search if you want to, but you don't have to say that about other people. It's not a statement of superiority. That elitism is something that I actively do not want people to think we as a mainstream activist group are trying to get people to understand us as superior or the next evolution of humanity or something. It's literally not something we're trying to do.
I've been kind of fortunate that I haven't encountered anyone who's held that kind of view yet. I've in the social group, and we're kind of spoiled because living in an urban area, like there is a higher population density. There are more people around. We could actually meet in person prior to COVID, obviously. Sorry, you're looking a bit tired. I'm sorry. But yeah, we've been having monthly Zoom meetings to kind of replace that. But yeah, I found that most of, like the vast majority of what we talk about is political stuff, or it's, you know, plans for the revolution, or like, you know, sharing around photos of people's cats and dogs, and like, yeah, and talking about like our favorite, you know, the best place to get a Bavarian chocolate cheesecake. You know, there's this real, and because we're a really, really diverse bunch of people as well, like no one in, obviously there's a huge cross section that is just other queer identities, like really, really happy to say that there's the ACE group that I belong to is a really welcoming space that trans people feel safe in. And, you know, there's a huge chunk of the community that is trans, non-binary, and there's, you know, I feel like representation-wise, we're doing pretty good.
Awesome.
But yeah, it almost doesn't feel like a queer group at times, because queerness doesn't make up the bulk of conversations that we have as a group. It's more like a social, just a gathering space where everyone can just exist as themselves. And like, that's kind of my vision for what I hope an ideal queer group can be. Is like, yeah, you can be just like super, super gay while you're there, but that's not necessarily the thing that defines your existence. Like, you don't have to be gay in response to everything else around you that is unfriendly to gayness. Like, you can just exist loudly as just a human rainbow among other human rainbows and share photos of your dog. Like, I don't know if how clear I'm being, but yeah, I love my friends. They're lovely people.
That's almost exactly what I was going to sort of elaborate on, because I feel like, especially the way that you describe what you have and what I also would like ACE groups to be. I mean, obviously you want people to feel free to discuss ACE issues, even if maybe they'll get a little serious sometimes, but in general, it's so that you can have a place where you can be you. You're not going to have people disrespecting your identity or acting like it's weird or acting like they're just kind of waiting around until you drop your phase. It's a place where, if everything goes right, you are safe from those kinds of interrogations, and you're with people who have something in common with you that you don't necessarily ever have in common with everybody else in a room, like ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, it's a lot of the time, if I'm having a conversation with somebody who I know is not ACE and may not know that I'm ACE, whenever we're having a conversation about something unrelated, and like, obviously this has come up here a few times as I've just gone straight off on a tangent. I feel like I've been pretty good compared to what I'm like normally, but if I want to spontaneously have a really serious conversation about something that is related to an ACE issue, often I'll just not, because I don't know if it's a safe situation or not. I don't know if this is going to turn into an argument. I don't know if I'm going to have to end up defending myself. Whereas in this group of people where I know that we're all kind of on the same page, if we're talking about, you know, I don't know, headcanoning different TV show or book characters as things, I can straight up be like, well, this person is ace despite the fact that they have sex once in this book, and here's all the reasons why. And like, I can be 90% confident that when I get yelled at by someone, it's going to be because, no, she's a lesbian and here's why, you know, and not for
Right.
and
What the hell is asexual, and how is that a
yeah,
thing?
yeah, like, it's a very non-hostile space, and like, it's a very welcoming of new ideas. And I think part of that is because everyone in that community is used to being told by people outside of the community that there's something wrong with them or with the views that they hold. So very rarely in that space have I encountered that kind of attitude that, like, no, you need to change.
Right.
It's the kind of group where, you know, if someone says something transphobic, they will be the only person in the room saying that. and it will lead to a very constructive discussion about how that was not okay, as opposed to someone saying something transphobic and it just getting glossed over because no one wants to confront it. Like, no, people want to confront that bullshit. Like,
right, and you assume that the person in the group who said it and didn't realize the impact or the problem associated with what they said would want to be corrected.
Yeah, it's a very healthy it's a very healthy space in terms of how disagreement is handled, partly because everyone in the room for the most part agrees. Like, I won't pretend that's not part of it. But partly also because no one in the group really wants to fight about who is right and who is wrong.
I see.
Like, when we discuss different ideas and people have different positions on things, no one is out to paint the other person as I don't know. There's a mentality that is absent when you're in a queer group of people who are fully supportive, and I think that mentality is this invalidating. That this assumption that the person you're talking to doesn't know enough to have come to their own conclusion. You know, there's this desire to share ideas and to learn from each other that is, like, funnily enough, that I only really encountered when I was at uni, where you, like, people were more willing to listen to each other because we all kind of assumed that there was a whole bunch of stuff that we didn't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not a very complete, it's not something that I've spent an awful lot of time thinking about, why, like, all the factors why this space is such, like, what distinguishes it as a safe space other than that it is a safe space. But yeah, I guess to circle all the way around back down to the original question, what is the best thing about being ace for me? It is 100%, you know, not being the only one and having other people who I can kind of express these experiences and these thoughts and feelings with.
That's legit. That's legit. My face is starting to hurt from smiling at all the positivity there. I guess the last thing I'll bounce off you is to talk a little bit about how the group itself, like, it's Canberra-based, is that right?
Yes, so we are based in the A.C.T. Basically started as a Facebook group.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I had met maybe 2 or 3 other people in person in real life, who were ace. And I knew of other people in the city who were ace, and my friend, who is a real go-getter, was just like, well, let's just create a Facebook group. And so she did. And, like, within a week, there were about 10, 15 people in it. And now, 2 years later, there are way more than that. Almost 200, I think, was it. All round about 200. And these are all people who were really disconnected before and didn't realize that there were other ace people in Canberra, maybe didn't realize that there were this many other ace people in Canberra. And, you know, we've had a few in-person meetups, and advocacy has grown out of it. Obviously, the reason why I've gotten involved in advocacy at all was because of these people who were around me, who I was like, we're all having these experiences that are kind of shitty. And when it comes to, good example, there's a group called Better Together in Australia, and they run a queer conference every year in a different city. And last year they held their first one in Canberra, and I didn't realize that this was Canberra's first ever queer conference ever, which blew my mind because it's, like I said, it's quite a lefty city. This is the kind of place where you could imagine people holding queer conferences. Also the nation's capital, not Sydney, unlike many people think it is. But yeah, so we went, and they had never had any ace content before at their conference. But we were like, hey, can we come along? Can we represent our folks and talk about our stuff? We did, and I developed and I ran a healthy relationships workshop with the help of the team of people who I went with, including my friend who was the founder of the group. And it was largely about, like, it was mostly a workshop about communicating and boundaries, and how to do those things in a healthy way in relationships, but informed primarily from an ACE perspective. So consent and navigating consent and accepting other people's truths about, like, self-truths was a huge part of it. And it was a really rewarding experience. And I felt like our presence, like as a unified group, like as representatives of the ACE community, was filling a gap that had only just been identified, but people were really receptive, and like everyone kind of had to show up for that to work. You know, we had to believe that we would be listened to, and we needed to be willing to bring quality material to the conference. The conference needed to be willing to make space for us. In my case, obviously, because I'm a poor person, me and a handful of the other members of my team needed scholarships to attend. You know, it was the kind of scenario that really gave me hope again for the queer community and for the ACE community's belonging in the queer community. But yeah, I feel like having these sort of social groups and having access to these kinds of groups where people can support each other is so, so important for allowing things like this to happen and to come to fruition, because I don't think that I would have gone to this conference if this community hadn't formed in the first place. I don't know that that would have been possible, because it really was like a team effort.
Right.
And I met, I think, 3 or 4 of the people on the team specifically through the ACE group. So, yeah.
Sounds
Ramble over.
Sounds like a great experience and a great group.
It really was.
So it's primarily the conversation and organization happens on Facebook, is that right?
It does. So it's on Facebook. It's expanded to Discord because a couple of people found out about the community who are not on Facebook. So we were like, okay, this needs to be a multi-platform thing. We need to make space for people who use social media in different ways. And surprise, surprise, there is a big crossover between the queer community and gamers. So a bunch of people were on Discord. So we were like, well, let's have a Discord server that is the ACE community, A.C.T. ACEs, but on Discord.
All right. No, that's a good idea.
So the monthly meetings, they get advertised through Facebook and also through there. And, you know, there's a whole lot of people, myself included, who are on the Facebook and the Discord because, you know, we want to kind of keep everything relatively cohesive. And also it's just like, it's cool stuff. There's different stuff happening on there. But yeah, as soon as it is safe and sensible to meet up in person again, we'd like to start doing that some more. And we're looking at, because our usual venue is one that serves alcohol, and obviously like there are some people in the community who for different reasons, either because they're Muslim or because you know, they're teetotalers, or they don't want to be in a venue where alcohol is being served. So we found a couple of other options that will be more comfortable spaces for those people to attend, and we can maybe improve how we've been doing things so far to be more inclusive.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Always want to be more expansive, more inclusive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, like, growth is a lifelong process, and I think that reads true for communities as well as for individuals.
Oh, yeah. I will agree 100% with that. Oh, so are you basically just involved with that group, or are there other activism-related things that you do?
At the moment, so on an individual level, I'd like to do more. I don't want for my activism to be just like chiefly through this group that I belong to. Like, I think it is something that you've kind of got to make it a part of your life. But yeah, with that said, like, I do a little bit of writing, not as much journalism, but I like to do more. And there's a number of, you know, journals and things that I follow that I've noticed have not had any ACE content. Like for the most part, ACE content on the internet is collected and delivered mostly by ACE community groups. And part of being an active part of the queer community, I think, is like putting yourself out there. So I'm going to be, like, I've been sending through some pitches and cold calls and things. And like, I'm at the very beginning of my writing career. So like, I'm not the, I'm not taking my success as necessarily being reflective of people don't want to hear from ACE people as much as my portfolio at the moment is quite small. But yeah, I've had some really nice, there's a small press here, the Clouds of Magellan Press, and they publish an annual called Bent Street, and I've been in 2 editions of theirs, and they're a really, really fabulous collection of work just from all across the queer spectrum. So yeah, I mean, from a creative standpoint, that's mostly my tool for activism, is like creating content to help people understand who ACE people are and that we're not scary.
Yeah,
We're nice, we just want to be friends.
that's very much what I kind of do too, because I like to, I prefer creating content to in-person activism. I've done that too, just because I somehow ended up in this, I guess, perceived ACE community leader position, but I'm not really comfortable with doing stuff like that. I'm not as much a on the ground in-person educator or activist. It's more about creating content. So I relate to kind of what you're doing and pitching and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think you've got to use the tools that you have, and like not everyone feels that they are as an accomplished a speaker as they are a writer, or you know, like everyone has their own tool set that they can bring.
Yeah, I've definitely been, I've done like a bunch of presentations and panels and things in person, but like that's just, I'm not afraid of it. That's the thing. I'm not afraid to do it. I just wouldn't choose it as like, this is what I want to do for activism. I don't necessarily want to give a bunch of presentations and stuff. I can do it. I will do it. I'm not opposed to it, but yeah, it's yeah, I definitely feel more comfortable just banging out a long essay or something. This is how it looks. Than a bunch of editing. Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting sometimes to pitch magazines that haven't posted any content of that nature and see if they'd be willing. I've once sold a piece called Enjoy Your House Full of Cats.
I wish I lived in a house full of cats.
I unfortunately am allergic, but...
Oh no! You'll have to get a hairless cat.
Yeah, I could do that.
Chicken fillet goblins.
I'm not sure if it's the hair or the saliva that I'm allergic to, or it could be both, but either way, I do okay if I know I'm going to encounter a cat, and then I can take like medicine. Sometimes if I'm surprised by a cat, it's not pretty. So, oh well. But yeah, it's like, I'm not even a proper cat lady. I don't have any cats. But anyway, that's...
There are other four-legged furry friends.
Yeah, I don't seem to have issues with dogs, but I don't want to be around dogs as much. Don't dislike them, but I think I'd rather have a cat if I was going to have a pet. But I'm allergic to them. So I don't know, and I think it's just some cats. So I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Oh well. Well, I think this would be a good time to kind of wrap up what we're, anything else you wanted to add in as a closing statement or anything, or did you just want to say, you know, anything to people who might want to find you around on the internet, you and your groups?
Sure. Well, if you're in Australia, the A.C.T ACEs, we don't refuse people on basis of geography. So if you want to join the A.C.T ACEs, or if you're thinking of moving to Canberra, or you just want to have some friends on the internet who have shared life experience, go looking for us. It's A.C.T ACEs,
Mm-hmm.
2 words.
Okay.
And yeah, we welcome everyone from anywhere. And on Discord, same thing.
Okay.
But yeah, I write under my name, which is Kat Kotzel, and there isn't a lot of my stuff out there, but fingers crossed, if I write good stuff, hopefully there'll be more.
Yeah, I'd be glad to link all of these things in the info. So if y'all who are listening / watching this, who have stayed with us through all of this, then you can look in the info box and click through. But other than that, anything else that they should know about social media wise or anything like that, blog wise?
No.
That's it.
I think the resources that are out there, Avon is still a good one. It's one of the older communities that's kind of not as active as it used to be, I don't think.
Yeah.
But it's still, they have a lot of resources that people might find useful.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, yeah, I am not as active on social media as some other people, but it's mostly the A.C.T ACEs.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I guess I'll thank my viewers and listeners for tuning in for all of our conversations, and we encourage you to drop some comments. And thank you very much, Kat, for being part of this. This was amazing and wonderful and fun.
Thank you. I'm sorry for all of the tangents and all of the rambling, and I just, the floodgates opened and everything was like blur.
Yeah, you know what? I think most of my viewers are really used to rambling by now because most of my videos are very long. But they knew what they signed up for, and I've got 5,000 something subscribers who like punishment like that. So I think you're in the right.
I hope that some people enjoyed my rant.
Oh, I certainly did.
Good.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.